2, hello. Check 2, 2. What's up? Hello. Hello, friends. How is it going? 2, check. Check this thing on. Hello? Hello, McFly? Fellow Patriots, I'm officially done with my first college. I'm not muted. Don't mute. Don't mess around with me, John. I'm officially done with my first college semester and I got good grades in all my classes, though I had my ops give me food poisoning a couple days ago. I'm finna get fucked up at some parties. Woo. Heck yeah, coal mine. Once again, some great intel. Some great intel from community member and intrepid journalist. An official Zoomer of the community. Coal mine. Thank you, coal mine. You could tell how hip I am with the lingo, the way I expertly repeated all that. You know? All the Zoomer lingo. I know all about it. I know all about it. I know I do leave out Bolden. I don't think I realized that Bolden was a Zoomer until later. You are seeing it in IMAX 3D, correct? That's absolutely right, Dimitri. IMAX 3D. This evening at 6 p.m. We'll be seeing Avatar: The Way of Water. Very excited. Very, very excited. I'm seeing it at 9. Hell yeah. 6 p.m. the early bird. Yeah, well, Grom, I got a kid, so I can't be out too late. I'm actually, it's weird. This is actually an evening where somehow, through some strange coincidence, my partner and I both double booked. We double booked. And she has a thing with her friends, and I got tickets for Avatar. So we're actually leaving our son with our older son for the first time, who's 17. But he's never babysat before, but we're just leaving them. We're just leaving them to fend for themselves. So this is the first time this has ever happened. So I don't want to be out too late. I don't want to get too crazy with this. I don't want to get too crazy with it. Home Alone 4. I'm sure it's going to be fine. But I don't want to be staying out till midnight or anything. So the 6 p.m. was a good time to go do it. No after party. No. YouTube babysitter. It's probably going to be mostly what's going to be going on. Yeah. No after party. No. I will not be going to the Avatar: The Way of Water after party, unfortunately. Can't go see Avatar for 2 reasons. Train strike, and I'm no picket line crosser, and I don't want to. Well, I'm going to ignore the second part. King Window, I'm going to ignore that second part. Pretend I didn't see that. But obviously, respecting a rail strike is a totally legitimate reason not to go. And that's the only legitimate reason that there is. It's the only legitimate reason to not see Avatar: The Way of Water. I'm very hyped. Very hyped, folks. In fact, I'm not sure when, because according to our timer, our countdown timer, we still got 12 hours, but I guess the timer on the Discord was different. According to the timer on the Discord, it's been released already, and according to the Nightbot countdown, I guess we were a day off. because it's noon Eastern. It's 12:49 Eastern, and it's saying early screening for verified accounts. Yeah, it's saying it's not going to be released for another 12 hours, so that would be past midnight. So I guess we were one day off. Oh, 12 hours, 49 and 11 minutes ago. Okay, Jesus. Okay, never mind. Forget I said anything. Never mind. It's released. It's here. I was confused by that because I was just skimming over the timer and said it's 11 seconds ago until the masterpiece. Little bit interesting wording there. If you tweet that you're streaming, I'll gift a sub. Okay, Lexi, I'll take you up on that. I will take you up on that. I just did a screenshot. I just did a screenshot and I'm going to tweet that I'm live right now. I saw yesterday at 3. Oh my goodness. Dimitri. You guys serious? Oh, you were serious, all right. M3G. I don't fuck around about this kind of thing, all right? I don't mess. This is not a meme. This is not a game. This is not a joke. Okay, this is deadly serious to me. Yeah, I'm serious about Avatar. It's less than 6 hours from right now. 6 hours from this moment, I will be in the IMAX cinema witnessing this film. See, I don't get this take. I respect your opinion, M3G. I mean, kind of. I love Cameron. He's the best, but Avatar, nah. I think that's a weird take to me. I don't want to call you out too much here.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old
I don't want to call you out too much, but that to me is messed up. You say Cameron's the best, but I don't know if you really believe it. You're saying the words, but do you believe it? That's the question. I don't think you do think that he's the best. Okay, Lexi, I tweeted. It's done. I tweeted that I'm live. If you can listen to the full East German national anthem with English lyrics and not tear up over what was lost, I'll give 5 subs. What if I just tear up internally? Does that still count? If I'm crying like on the inside, but I just remain stoic and stone-faced on the outside? If it isn't Rob, your is top tier chatters. Hello, Husker. Very kind of you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to
Very
talk
kind
you
of you
through
to
all
say.
this.
Still waiting for a 4K of Aliens and Titanic and Abyss. Aliens is probably my favorite movie of all time. I really would like to... The Abyss is amazing. I haven't seen it in a few years. I would really love to watch it again. So thank you very much, Lexi, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you also, Dimitri, for the gifted sub. I can't remember already if I have already forgotten. I'm too excited. I'm too excited about Avatar to remember whether I thanked Dimitri for the gifted sub. But thank you, Dimitri. In fact, I just saw a really chill guy that the new Insurgents episode just came out. I need to check out Aliens. I've only seen Alien and listened to the audiobook Alien Out of the Shadows, which is brilliant ensemble cast and movie level sound effects. Can you believe they banned a lefty streamer? I mean, yeah, I can believe that. That seems to be something that happens often. What is Alien Out of the Shadows? Is that like is that connected to the Alien universe, Husker? Is that like a novel, like in the extended universe or something? I'm surprised you haven't seen Aliens. I love Alien as well. It's one of my favorite movies. Maybe even on a technical level, it's better. It's a better film than Aliens, but Aliens is just so fucking good. It's just so good. It's canon. Ripley's in it. It's what happens after she leaves the Nostromo and Alien in the timeline. But after she leaves the Nostromo, she's floating in hypersleep for 57 years. I don't know if this counts as canon, Husker. I think there might be some dispute on this. I've been waiting to watch Aliens with you. I know, John. I'm genuinely sorry. Like I really want to watch this film with the community. I really do.
Use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Rob, do not miss your special trailers that come with your IMAX 3D showing. I have had friends jealous of just that alone.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. I'm going to be there well in advance. I like Alien 3 M3G. I enjoy it. I don't think it matches up to the highs of Alien or Aliens, but I still think it's a worthy entrant in the franchise. So Jordan popped by a moment ago to let people know that the new Insurgents episode just dropped, and I would encourage people to listen to that.
You can count on
really
me.
good
You're
episode.
gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Really good
Hell
episode
yeah.
with Brett Ehrlich from TYT. I'll put the link right there in the chat. Highly recommend people to listen to that. Very good. We talked about like the Trump NFT stuff. We talked a little bit about Matt Taibbi and Elon and all that business. I went deep. We had some unplanned conspiracy talk in this because those JFK documents, I guess, are just being released now. So I do make an effort in this recent episode to JFK pill the Insurgents audience. I do. We'll see if it's successful or not. I don't know how much success I had with Jordan or Brett. They seemed maybe a little unconvinced by my paranoid ramblings. But hopefully there will be a few people in the audience that will. I mean, who's already in. Okay, you're just not an obsessed person with it. Maybe there's a few people in the Insurgents audience who will pick up the book The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot, which I would recommend to anyone who's interested in this. And this book basically forms the basis for the JFK assassination theory that I outlined in the Insurgents episode yesterday. Okay, I just found out. Breaking news here. Breaking news. One of my friends that I was supposed to see the film with is now saying he's sick. He was very hyped to see it. And now I don't know if it's going to happen. There's still supposed to be another guy that I know to go see this film with. Maybe I'll just end up going flying solo. Flying solo to the IMAX 3D. Guess what? I don't mind. I don't want to talk to you during this film anyways. Mike, yeah, I'm calling you out, sir. Who was supposed to be hyped about Avatar 2, and now he's letting this so quote unquote sickness disrupt that. Very unfortunate. I'll take you as well, Valkyrie. Yeah, I'll stream it. Mike, come on. He's down with the sickness. Jesus. Okay, so that's some breaking news. By the way, thank you, Jameson, for the 22 months tier 1. I really appreciate that, Jameson. Thank you. Happy Avatar The Way of Water Day to you as well. Very unfortunate that Mike is canceling. That's gonna go against the ledger. The ledger that I carry around up here, where people get the good points or bad points, and some people end up with just like a little red X over their names.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Looks like that's what's going to happen with old Mike. Thank you, Comrade Social Distancing, for the gifted sub. What do the different tiers do? The different tiers, there's different emotes. You get exclusive emotes.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
You get exclusive emotes at tier 2 and tier 3, and I get more of a kickback from the higher tiers as well, if you want to just support the channel. You also get a special little flare. You get a little flare. A tier 3 and a tier 2 flare. Thank you, Quaker Oats Sky, as well, for the 14 months tier 1. Thank you. That Megan McCain emote. Well, M3G, like...
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to
there's
talk
a way
you
to get
through
all the
this.
emotes that are available on this channel. This channel has some of the very best emotes on the entire platform of Twitch. There's a way to get them, and you can use them wherever you are in Twitch. You can use the emotes from this channel for the mere price of $5. That's nothing. That's barely anything. Or if you have an Amazon Prime account, it's free. It's free of charge to subscribe with your Amazon Prime account. So if you think the emotes are good, I'll tell you how to get them. Is by subscribing to the program. And the main reason, as everyone knows, why I'm so enthusiastic about Avatar is obviously because not everyone knows this, but because of my starring role. That's right, me, Rob Rousseau, my starring role in Avatar: The Way of Water. It's a big debut for me. It's a big moment. A little nervous about making my big silver screen debut. But it was such a great opportunity to work with James Cameron and to join the cast of Avatar: The Way of Water. Couldn't turn it down. This little preview. Yeah. Really working with the mocap team was really special. Really special group. Really enjoyed being a part of this. You know, it's film history. It's film history, you know, and I can be a part of that. It's amazing. You know, that's really an incredible thing. So, you know, it's very exciting for me. I'm a little nervous to see what the reaction is going to be from people to my big, what I hope to be a star-making turn in James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water. Even in crowd scenes, you can clearly make out Rob, aka the only Navi with the mustache. That's right. That's what I was kind of bringing to the table with that. You don't see a lot of Navi mustaches. In terms of facial hairstyles, they're not really that inventive. Your friend won't even go to you to see it. He's probably too nervous hanging out with a big like Hollywood celeb. You know? That's probably why. Rob, how is working with Zoe Saldana? I read that she was deeply inspired by you. She's just a class act all around, you know? Just a class act. I think I was able to teach her a few things about like acting. That's the big thing for me, you know? It's like when people come to me, when they come to my trailer, they want some advice, they want feedback about how the shooting went that day. I want to be open to that, okay? I'm not going to be standoffish with people. I mean, yeah, like the people under the A-list, you know, the the supporting actors, the extras, whatever. No, get the fuck out. Like I don't want to talk to you. But like the big celebs, you know, when they want to bounce some ideas off me, when they want feedback, I'm more than happy. You know, come on in. More than happy to pitch in however I can.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
When does a video game of Avatar come out, or is it in development purgatory? I don't know, actually, Dimitri, and thank you for the 100 friend coin. I'm not sure. I remember there was a video game for the original, but I don't know if it was like a big hit. It wasn't a big hit like the film. So I don't know what's going on with the video game. Is it true Cameron can be toxic at times to work with? I mean, it kind of seems like that. Yeah, that's why they call him Iron Jim. You know? Doing any voiceovers for the game? Yes. Yes, I am. Can you respond to the Daily Mail's report that you trashed a hotel room at the Cairo Ritz after the Egyptian premiere? And the Cameron told the front desk to, quote, give you anything you need or it'll only get worse. Listen, it's just when you ask for Diet Coke and they bring Coke Zero, these are two clearly different products, all right? And if I wanted a product with sucralose in it and not aspartame, I would ask for that product, okay? I don't want to see any of that. And it's literally violence. And, you know, when you're a big-time celeb, like I am, you want to be treated with a certain modicum of respect. You know? That's all. That's all I'm asking. I don't ask a lot. But, you know, if I'm going to be staying in your establishment, let's make sure we're just not treating me like I'm some fucking nobody. Okay? Is that much to ask? Oh, I'm like a spoiled actor. Ooh. Just because I want to be treated with basic dignity. You know? Throwing it at the staff member involved is perfectly acceptable. I'll just put it out there.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Oh, thank you, Lexi, for the 100 friend coin. Everyone juiced Rob's tweet. He deserves to grow. Thank you, Lexi. I appreciate that. Thank you. A relatively new community member, Lexi Rose, is showing a lot of enthusiasm that, frankly, I think is making the rest of you look a little bit sitting back on your haunches, let's say. Can't work under these fucking conditions. Thank you. Thank you, G. Kleppy. You understand this. You understand this. Rob asked for an energy drink. Energy drink to give him a little pep in his step. They brought him a ray and he tore down the lighting rig and killed an assistant producer. Is it that much to ask that they're aware of my basic brand sponsorship commitments? Like, this is basic stuff. This is day one stuff. This is day one stuff. Just have a basic understanding and awareness of like where my brand loyalties are. Everyone in the crew, everyone at the hotels should be getting a copy of my personal rider. And again, if it's a spoiled actor thing, just to ask the people maybe take a glance at that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's so much to ask. Oh, that you take a look at my rider to take a look at the various sodas and energy drinks that I prefer. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. Is it too much to ask that you just do your basic job? Of course, one boxed mac and cheese, ketchup, black pepper, Diet Coke, and rain. No longer the rain, though, but that's mostly it. Not that hard. See, even Alana is showing how it is trickier than it needs to be. Is it spoiled to simply want whatever you want whenever you want it for art? People have no respect for artists anymore. Like that's ultimately what it comes down to. Our society just doesn't value creative people. It's very unfortunate. Imagine Rob lecturing the personal assistant who brought Rockstar Energy instead about how the Rain Corporation would have my fucking head if the Razzie. We're just even drinking that fucking swill. We're getting confused from major community members about the status of my Rain endorsement. I'm a little alarmed by some of this, actually. I don't think the command has been deleted. Unfortunately. I rubbed through a bowl of Kraft Dinner to PA's face because they added too much ketchup and the spice hurt his throat so much. He couldn't act. Oh. Just too spicy. Way too spicy. Cool J, that's a warning, okay? That's a warning. Some people in this community are getting a little bit too comfortable saying certain incorrect ideas, repeating certain incorrect ideas in the chat. That's a warning, Jay. We don't have to get you. Do you want to test me? You want to test me? We don't have to go down that path. We don't have to go down that path. Silence for truth. That's right. I'm doing my Elon impression. I was actually thinking of having some chopped up MNC later. Hell yeah, Sean.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Remember the energy drink, Rich Energy, that swindled the American F1 team Haas Racing? If not, it is worth the dive, tears of joy rolling on the floor laughing.
That sounds interesting. I'm not familiar with that one. Dimitri, thank you for the 200 friend coin. I can't believe you just doxed Rob's mac and cheese preferences like that. You know, as I've said before, usually I go with that President's Choice white cheddar boxed macaroni and cheese. The other day I did have just the original orange KD, chopped, of course. And it was really good. It had been a while since I had it. It was very good. Very good. It is a weird Canadian brand name. It's true. I don't know which president is choosing these things. It's just like the president of the food corporation, I guess. I'm so hungry now. I'm sorry, Marina. I'm sorry. I just had a little lunch prior to getting started here. I had some leftover Lebanese food and I ate that. I got a mixed plate, which is like the beef and the chicken, which we call shish taouk. The chicken is shish taouk here in Montreal. I don't know if it's called that anywhere else. And the beef is shawarma, which elsewhere around the world is often lamb, but in Montreal it's beef. I had some leftovers of that. I was eating that last night. I had some leftovers this morning. That shit is so weird. Yes. Anyways, back to my Royal Crown Cola. I'm an RC Cola proponent, although I haven't had it for a long time. It's Turkish. Sis means skewer in Turkish, and tavuk is chicken. Okay. I guess, yeah. It's just in Montreal. Maybe this is just a Montreal phenomenon. It's always just referred to as Lebanese food, but maybe there's some kind of regional conflict or feud that's at play there. I'm not sure. After filming for so long, Rob began to believe he was actually in Home Alone. Started setting up death traps around the set. Cameron was tarred and feathered 4 times. I would never tar and feather Iron Jim. Never. Never.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Most Middle Eastern food is the same dishes with different regional names.
Thank you, Lexi, for the 200 friend coin. Yeah, that sounds about right. Anyway, I'm a huge fan. Sorry for showing up late, but Rob, have you booked tickets to see Avatar Way of Water? I booked them last week, baby. Booked them last week. Although my friend Mike now is bailing. Just going to text him back here. Come on, Mike. I'm calling out Mike today. Gosh, I'm very excited. I'm gonna just pitch one more time that people listen to this new episode of The Insurgents because it's a really good one, and I really did make my best effort to JFK pill the audience, and maybe we can take away. Maybe we can take a look at some of these like new JFK docs that just dropped. And as I outlined on the Insurgents podcast this week, though, I'm not really one of these people that thinks there's going to be some smoking gun or piece of like essential evidence that's ever going to be released in these classified JFK documents. I've kind of mentioned this before, but I think that's kind of just like a red herring. I think all the information is already out there. We already basically know what happened. There's going to be no some memo being like, and now to commence the JFK assassination plot. This is not going to exist. You know? Even as Mr. X, played by Donald Sutherland in JFK outlines, no one has said he must die. Right? There's always plausible deniability. I like the idea of going over it in chat, and we've gone over this extensively. I'm kind of an amateur JFK assassination. I don't know. I wouldn't say researcher, but I guess as I outlined in the podcast this week, they already have an excuse for why the CIA has an Oswald employee file. As I outlined in the Insurgents podcast this week, it's like we don't even need to see like, oh, there's this evidence that, we have this file on Oswald. Of course Oswald was an intelligence asset. We don't need to see any evidence that confirms this. We know he was. He's from fucking the Office of Naval Intelligence. He was ONI. He defects to the Soviet Union. He comes back like 6 months later and they're like, oh, come on back, sir. Welcome back to the country. Here's your passport. With no debriefing, no punishment, no like consequences whatsoever. They're just like, we're going to look the other way on this whole defection thing, which is America famously does often with these defectors. Then he ends up becoming known as this like pro-Castro guy while sharing an office down the street from the Office of Naval Intelligence in New Orleans, sharing an office with all these anti-Castro Cuban expats, gusanos, just sharing office space together as one does. And yeah, they end up rolling the presidential cavalcade, or what would you call that? The presidential, not cavalcade, the whole the route, the visitation route. Roll it right past the book depository where this guy just happens to have a little gig. Motorcade. Thank you. Cavalcade. It was not a cavalcade. The presidential wagon train. That was a pretty awful attempt at trying to come up with the word I was looking for there. They just roll the motorcade right past the book depository where this obvious intelligence asset just happens to have a little gig. Little day job. And then of course, I mean, I went into this a little bit on the podcast. I think there's more things. I mean, there's more than just Oswald being an intelligence asset that goes into this story. There's the fact that Oswald couldn't do the shooting. Physically not possible to fire 3 shots at Kennedy as Kennedy is driving away from the books depository, missing once, and then scoring 2 direct hits on Kennedy afterwards in the back and in the head. And the bullet that goes into his back, around like the middle of his back here, exiting through his throat, where you see JFK clutching his throat after, and then causing like 5 different wounds in the governor of Texas who was riding next to JFK at the time. Followed by the second bullet, which was a direct hit right on his skull, which caused, of course, a reaction like that as he's been shot. There's that stuff. There's the autopsy, where the doctors and nurses who examined Kennedy initially said he's got a massive gaping wound in the back of his head where his fucking brain exited after he was shot. And then immediately, like the next day, after getting calls from DOD representatives were saying like, oh no, actually I got that one wrong. Actually, no, on second thought, it was not like that at all. And it was that was actually where he was shot, is the back. And that's, I was confused at first. And just the whole idea of the bullet and Oswald and the bullet. Like, if you can just, even if you think Oswald was one of the shooters, which is possible, even if you think that he was, if you believe that it's not possible for one bullet to cause as much damage as that second shot did, if you just, the whole magic bullet idea, if you just believe that that's bullshit, then that means there was more than one shooter. That means it's a conspiracy. That means it's a cover-up. Did you watch the second Oliver Stone film that came out last year? Yeah, and I saw Oliver Stone do that Q&A in Quebec City. It was really cool. We did a whole episode on it on the show. But that's the kind of thing. I mean, I mentioned at the time, I enjoyed the movie. It's a documentary, Johnny. It's like a JFK documentary. But that's what I mentioned when we talked about this a couple months ago, and I talked about this in the podcast as well, which is that I don't really think there's that much new information that's being released in these documents, these declassified documents. I think these are all just like, you get little Easter eggs for the JFK research community, and it just strings people along. I don't think there's going to be anything, there's never really anything new or interesting that gets released in these things. Maybe there's things that sort of confirm things that are already obvious. But overall, I think these are just ways to like string people along and allow this to continue going on for decades when all the information that you really need is already out there. And like I was saying before as well on the podcast, and I've talked before on this show about it, which is that the reason that I think it's interesting to talk about is just because it's a one puzzle piece in a larger story about America and the United States government and power, and who has power really in the United States government. It's one puzzle piece in a larger story. That's why I think it's kind of interesting to talk about and think about. The most important question to ask an uninitiated is, who gained from this? Who benefits? Who benefits? Again, it's another thing I talked about. Vietnam immediately so in the early 60s, the CIA pitches Operation Northwoods to Kennedy, where we want to stage false flag terror attacks, including on like US warships, in order to escalate the conflict with Cuba. And then lo and behold, after this assassination by a pro-Castro activist of Kennedy who said no to Operation Northwoods, who did not want to proceed with it, then there's an attack in the Gulf of Tonkin, which immediately drastically escalates the Vietnam War, which Kennedy was trying to pull out of, drastically escalates the Vietnam War into this 10-year quagmire, this 10-year in which America lost. They lost the Vietnam War. In some ways that's true, but who lost? Who really lost? The United States military lost. The United States military industrial complex won bigly. They came out looking like fucking gold. 10 straight years. 10 straight years of this unlimited money printing machine to Bell helicopters and all the big weapons manufacturers. You know? And then not only are they escalating in Vietnam, they're going into Indonesia. They're going into Chile and other places in Latin America, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Africa, the Middle East. It's just the whole everything escalates, and this approach of the United States government led by the CIA in overthrowing and destabilizing and coupping and invading any country around the world that steps out of line, that doesn't immediately agree to every single condition being offered them to become like client states of the U.S. in carrying out this very specific global capitalist project, which benefits primarily the United States. All this kind of stuff immediately escalates. Anyway, I don't know if I was ready to do a whole conspiracy stream. I talked a little bit about this on the podcast, and I would encourage people to listen to it. It's not the only thing that we talked about, though, obviously. I don't want to spoil it too much. I think you should listen to it. But, I think it's interesting to talk about, folks. I think it's interesting to talk about. Anyway. Honestly, after reading Jason Hickel's The Divide, which Ben Norton, I assume,
you can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
After listening to his recent interviews, you learn that all historical finance is crooked as fuck. All international finance is crooked as fuck. And the thing, Johnny, as well, like I said, it's the JFK assassination is not just in and of itself just something that the be all and end all to talk about. But it's one puzzle piece that explains, that tells a little story. I've promised now for years to do a whole episode on this, what I call my ultimate conspiracy panopticon. I really need to do a whole thing where I get out the red string and connect all the dots together. But there's a story, let's go back 100 years, going from the Roaring '20s, the conspiracy singularity, going from the Roaring '20s, the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression, FDR and the New Deal, the business plot, World War II, the formation of the CIA, heavily also implicated with Wall Street, right? There's a story about powerful interests within the United States, business interests and banking interests, that were not very happy about the New Deal these New Deal policies, and wanting to claw back the power that they felt that they lost in this new paradigm of this very high marginal tax rate and these New Deal style welfare state policies, which led to the most prosperous economic time in American history. And the JFK, like the business plot failed. A lot of the people that were involved in the business plot, and a lot of powerful business and interests and elites in American and Canadian society at this time supported the Nazis or sympathized with the Nazis and did business with the Nazis. And then you have the formation of the CIA, as Aaron Good points out, heavily tied to Wall Street investment, Wall Street, the powerful banking interests on Wall Street. The rat lines, Operation Paperclip, like Allen Dulles. That's right. Like Allen Dulles. The rat lines, Operation Paperclip, bringing in these Nazis into the United States government. And then you get into the Korean War, JFK. The subsequent American foreign policy, CIA-led foreign policy in the post-JFK landscape. You go to Nixon, who, even though he was a conservative, he was a Republican, but still tried to challenge the hegemonic power of the intelligence community in the United States government, and also got disposed of just in a little bit of a different way, leading directly to Reagan and the final nail in the coffin of these New Deal policies and the Reagan era. Going into then 9/11 and the war on terror. All of this shit is connected. Okay? That's what I mean. The JFK assassination is one piece of that puzzle. The Bush family, yes, deeply implicated in all of this. Both Prescott Bush, Nazi sympathizing Prescott Bush, George H.W. Bush, possible JFK assassin, or one of the shooters who was in Dallas on that day, George W. Bush, the president during and after 9/11 and the war on terror. Come on, folks. I should have been playing the JFK conspiracy music this whole time. If there's one thing I could take back about the last 10 minutes of me talking about this, I would have been playing that John Williams JFK soundtrack. That would have been probably better. And maybe given it a different title than just Hello on the screen. It played in our heads. Thank you, Dakadude. This is what I mean, folks. It's just one. Why are you some random Canadian guy? Why are you obsessed with JFK? Why do you think JFK is so important? And it's not. It's not that I think JFK is some wonderful guy or anything. Or I think it's just fun. Like it's just some conspiracy wacko. It's because the JFK assassination is a very important puzzle piece in this larger story about power in the United States and who has it. And is the United States actually a democracy? Who's actually running this country? These are the questions. JFK is just a part of that. JFK wasn't a savior at all. No, you're right, Goth Engelson. He wasn't the savior of all this. He was just the most important guy that all these people killed. Not a savior at all. But like I outlined in the podcast this week, someone who had a different vision for what American foreign policy should be, was still very anti-communist, had shown in the past that he was willing to go along with what the CIA wanted, such as the Bay of Pigs, which is a humiliation for Kennedy, and probably part of the reason that he wanted to start clawing back power from these people. Had a different vision for what foreign policy should be, had a different understanding of the third world and these burgeoning post-colonial movements in the third world, and how he didn't think that America should take this heavy-handed approach with these countries and be overthrowing them and sanctioning them and carrying out these assassinations and coups, and wanted to work with these countries and allow them to kind of grow at their own development. and wanted ultimately to claw back power from this entrenched intelligence community and the military industrial complex. And that was not acceptable to them. We should start a Google Doc to build out a timeline. I'd love to build a collage, poster, pamphlet, or something based on this kind of American Empire dialectical history. That would actually be a really cool project, Old Dutch. We should do that. Let's talk about that. I was going to do... I don't know if I should do it today. Now I'm talking about it. I feel like I could have done it today. Just opening up a little document, just putting all the time, like a little timeline together. And you see how it's all connected. His assassination opened the floodgates. It's like they were emboldened after they killed the president. Well, that's it. It's like, who's going to challenge them then? Who's going to challenge them after that? It's like that classic Bill Hicks bit, and Bill Hicks, who loved talking about this stuff. He has this theory about every new president, and anytime you win the presidential election, they bring you into the back room, one of the infamous dark smoky rooms, and they play a little movie for you. And it's this video of the Kennedy assassination from a different angle that you've never seen before. And after the film's over, they shut it off and say, "Any questions?" And I can't remember the punchline. Can't remember. It's like, where do I sign the check, or where do I... Fuck. I really blew that. This is why I'm not a famous stand-up comedian like Bill Hicks. Great joke. I really crushed that one. I mean, he was kind of a savior when you look at how his advisors were rapidly advocating for World War III and nuclear holocaust. And he was the only clear head in the room. Well, this is what I mean, heroic skeleton. And people point to, like, the Bay of Pigs. They point to some previous bad foreign policy blunders that happened. But that's kind of the point, is that he's surrounded by all of these bloodthirsty imperialists that want to escalate. And he was one of the only people being like, I don't know about this. Maybe this is not such a good idea. And I know that like the Lumumba assassination happened, I think, on his watch, but the plans were already in place by the time he got elected. And I think he was very shocked to learn about the assassination of Lumumba and was aware of the role that the United States had played in that assassination. I'm extremely ignorant on this topic. You must have missed a lot, because I've done a lot of streams about this, Dimitri. I'm extremely ignorant on this topic. I'm intrigued by JFK's death, but at the same time, goodbye, bourgeois fuck. Well, that's the whole thing, Dimitri, is that we shouldn't pretend that JFK or any other major American elite or figure in the U.S. government is going to be some savior, or that there's some wonderful person. But I do think there's a lot of evidence that he did, at the very least, have a different vision for what American foreign policy should be and what America's relation to the third world should be. That ran up against the entrenched interests in the intelligence community and in the military industrial complex, and especially wanted to start pulling back from Vietnam, bringing back the troops and the advisors that he had already committed, and that was a red line for them. They said, no, we're not going to let that happen. And then I should have, I have so many regrets about this segment. I should have just committed right off the bat with the conspiracy title and the music and all the stuff and the red string and all that shit. One of these days I'm going to do it. Really in his element. This is really what I bring to the table here on twitch.tv. Talking about this and beverages and snacks and this kind of stuff. So what got you so interested in this, and when did it start? I'm not sure when it started. I've always been interested in Vietnam. I became really interested in the the Korean War, especially like prior to starting the stream. And the Korean War is something that I tried to talk about a lot, which is not something that we really ever hear much about. I think when I saw the film JFK as well. I mean, these things that I'm outlining here, as I mentioned, it's in the Devil's Chessboard book, which I recommend. That's also the basis for the Oliver Stone film JFK. And there's some very compelling arguments in JFK about what happened. As I said, I just think that it's not just about JFK. It's not just about Vietnam. It's a larger story. Yeah, there's a great Parenti talk on it as well. And Johnny, before you were in the community, we did one long stream talking about that and listening to that speech one time. It's part of a larger story about power in the United States government. And really, it's about fascism, right? It's about fascism. I always wonder if I would have stuck around if I wasn't raided into TRRS during a JFK segment. I mean, I guess it's like, it speaks to the fact that sometimes like people raid the channel when I'm in the middle of talking about North Korea or I'm talking about JFK or any of these things. And sometimes I get the like feeling maybe I should pull back from this stuff. And like I was saying the other day in the Discord about Korea, like maybe I've lost more viewers or lost more community members than I've gained from doubling and tripling down on this. When I get a bunch of strangers coming in here and talking about this stuff that many people find alienating. But some people really choose to stick around. For some people, it really helps pull them over the hump, you know? And I guess it's more important. Who needs to make a sustainable living off this? What's more important is that I, pill people on these important subjects. Your interview with that international DSA caucus guy is what got you to seek me out. Is that the China talk that we did? That was a good one, yeah. That's true, G Clippy. There are broadcasters to watch. If people want an unprincipled take on DPRK, there's more than enough of that out there. Yes, he was a capitalist and had many faults, but his assassination, like Lincoln's, was a huge tragedy. The people of Cuba were devastated by his death because he was the best option for relations with the communist world. I mean, it's even one of the things that convinces me about the JFK assassination is when you read what Castro said about it after. When Castro, number one, was like, oh shit, this is not good. He was like, oh boy. But he was also like, when he read the details of what was being outlined in the Warren Commission, Castro was like, no, I don't think so. No. There's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. Probably it was almost a year ago, and then when I started watching, you were talking about the Korean Museum with the area where you can curse America. I was like, I'm home. I love that. I mean, it is really a good benchmark for people, right? Like we were saying before, it's like if you can get people to re-examine their feelings about North Korea and get people to just accept the idea that possibly they've been lied to. Like that's what it says right below me, right? If you can get people to accept the basic idea that they've been lied to about something like that, it opens the door to a lot of other interesting questions. What else are they lying about? What else are they not being truthful about? Is the history that I've been taught really the accurate history? Or have I been taught this for a very specific reason? I first saw you talk about DPRK and I was turned off, but also felt like I should at least listen and hear you out. I went through a weird realization that I have no idea what is going on over there. So I would say you helped. I'm not a new chatter despite the age of my account. My phone broke. I haven't replaced it, so I'm temporarily locked out. Okay, lurking worker. But yeah, I mean, that's at the bare minimum. You don't need to think that, like, I know there are people out there, like online or whatever, that think that it is some kind of like workers' paradise in DPRK, which I don't really agree with. It's still a very poor country. part of the reason that it's poor is because it has to spend so much of the resources that it has on defense for a very specific reason, because they do need to defend themselves against the country, the all-time largest military power directly parked on their border, the same military power that committed fucking genocide in their country. But at the very least, though, even if you don't think that it's some kind of workers' paradise, I think you can at least maybe wrap your mind around the idea that we don't really even know. And all these horror stories we hear about North Korea are, when you actually dig into the details, are very often come from dubious sources, are based on these kind of like defector testimonies, which are famously not trustworthy. You can look into, in fact, I would encourage people to watch the film Loyal Citizen of Pyongyang in Seoul, which outlines the role that the CIA, in conjunction with the South Korean intelligence apparatus, plays in taking these defectors and making sure they share certain messages. Yeah, Radio Free Asia, these CIA-linked propaganda outlets. Pretty interesting stuff, folks. Did I miss Avatar? I mean, kinda, yeah. We're more, now I'm talking about like this weird, my conspiracy singularity panopticon. Now. somehow we got on that. And I've still got the hello title, because I'm a professional streamer. I'm a professional streamer. Same with Xinjiang, really. Root sources are fucking shit when it comes to the claims on human rights abuses. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And for some reason, we're asked to like give the benefit of the doubt to people in the media and the United States government when it comes to these things. Oh, we've lied about every single one of these situations in the past, obviously, but of course we're not lying this time. This time we're telling the truth. I mean, just that. I mean, that's reason enough, I think, to be very skeptical about any of these kinds of claims. In fact, I saved this article for this exact reason. Like, look at this shit. Look at this shit from this piece, first of all, being shared by David Pugliese, who's one of the only decent journalists in the entire country of Canada. Look at this. We're supposed to these are the people we have to take seriously about China's egregious human rights abuses against Muslim people. The UK government will hold an inquiry into allegations SAS soldiers murdered scores of unarmed people during night raids in Afghanistan. The BBC reported in July, one SAS unit alone killed 54 Afghans in suspicious circumstances. These are the people that we're supposed to listen to when they tell us that we need to pay attention to these egregious human rights crimes that China is committing against Muslims. The same people. And they want to make us think that like China is the country that's really engaging in these grotesque crimes of, even if you believe the absolute worst fucking stories about it, forcing people to go into what they call these vocational schools as part of this de-radicalization program, and invading no countries, bombing no countries, not drone striking weddings or funerals or hospitals, not torturing people. But we're still like, they're the ones that we really care. The Muslim human rights defenders have logged on, and we're really ready to call them in for these egregious crimes. And like, these are the people, like these murderers, these liars and murderers, going back to the CIA and the intelligence community, both in the UK and in the US and Canada. Liars and murderers, folks. When you tug at these threads, that's what you will discover. They're not good people. They're not the good guys. They don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Not when it comes to Korea, not when it comes to China, not when it comes to Cuba, not when it comes to Venezuela, not when it comes to Vietnam, not when it comes to Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine. They're not to be trusted. Don't ever trust the imperialists, not even for a moment. That's what Che told us, folks. He was very clear in these directions. It's a very clear instruction there. Never trust the imperialists, not even for a moment. Nada. And too many of us still do. Too many of us say, well, this time let's hear them out. You know? This time we should hear them out. This time we think they're telling the truth. No. This is the editorial line of this program. No, we do not. No, we don't have to hear them out. No, we don't have to trust them. No, we don't have to give them the benefit of the doubt. In fact, we should assume that the liars and murderers, again, in the US and UK and Canadian security state, the intelligence community, the deep state, whatever the fuck you want to call it, we should assume every single time that they're lying about these official enemy countries. It doesn't mean we need to uphold these places completely uncritically. We don't need to do that. But we don't need to take any of these folks seriously, and we should assume first and foremost, anytime we hear any of these stories about human rights in China, about whatever, any of these official countries, or North Korea, or any of these countries that I was mentioning, Iran, assume that it's a lie, first and foremost, and work backwards from there. For some reason, this is really difficult for some folks on the platform of Twitch who opine daily about politics and foreign policy and these things. For some reason, it's really tricky for them to wrap their minds around the idea that we are, in fact, the baddies. And that we should not trust these people. Ever. And that nothing, the United States or Canada or the UK or any of these, the rules-based international order, nothing we do ever, when it comes to foreign policy, has anything whatsoever to do with human rights. That it has nothing to do with freedom or democracy or authoritarianism or any of the horse shit that they pull out anytime one of these stories comes up. Nothing. It has nothing to do with any of that shit. You have to erase this idea from your mind. Stop giving these folks the benefit of the doubt. They're liars and murderers. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about authoritarianism. In fact, we do not live in a democracy. In fact, we live in an authoritarian dictatorship. It's a dictatorship of capital. It's capital that controls everything. Capital that controls the military-industrial complex. Capital that controls the media, mainstream media, and all these social media companies. Forget this idea. Forget this idea that any time we talk about any of these stories, that it has anything to do whatsoever with human rights or any of the bullshit that they say it is. It's not true. It is not true. You are being lied to. We can't even get the LAPD to tell the truth. What business we have lecturing and figure wagging anyone else? Americans literally talk about a police state. They talk about a police state in North Korea or China or Cuba, while armed thugs, agents of the state, are just roaming the country every day, shooting citizens like fucking animals in the street. Citizens who have not been convicted of any crime. Citizens that have not done anything wrong. Just executing them in the street with zero repercussion, with zero challenge whatsoever. There was the largest protest movement in modern history just a few years ago in response to this. What did that protest movement in our precious little democracy, where we are allowed to protest and we have free speech and we're allowed to say these things, in our precious little Western democracy, what did this protest accomplish? Did it do anything to rein in these police killings? No, the police killings have increased. Did it do anything to rein in police spending? No, police funding for these police departments has increased. Is that a democracy? Is that freedom of speech? Is that freedom of expression? When you have the largest protest movement in modern history, resulting in the exact opposite reforms of what people were asking? And both parties are in 100% bipartisan agreement of the fact that police should just be funded even more? and that nothing should be done about this shit. And yeah, maybe the Biden administration will have a little different. Oh, we prosecuted Breonna Taylor's killers. Oh, we're investigating a few of these cases, which happen every fucking day. Don't be fooled by that either. There's no difference. It's great that the Justice Department is going after one of these high-profile cases. That's very obviously this fucking assassination of an innocent person. While the hundreds of other incidents that happen every single day, every single week, just get completely fucking ignored. We got a lot of killers. The truest thing Trump ever said, Matt, I've said it many times. The truest thing that he ever said. Are we so innocent? He was 100% correct in that case. Orange Man bad, though. That's true. He was bad. Listen, he was bad. Man, I've really been kind of on one for the last hour or so. This is what happens when someone says the word JFK. It's like my MK Ultra. It's like my MK Ultra signal. When someone talks about JFK. And then I've been for the last hour, I've been in this fugue state, just going on and on about this. But listen, if you're a lurker, if you're not familiar with this community or this channel, this is the kind of shit that we talk about. I did work myself into a shoot. I was activated by CIA call word. That's right. I was. And once again, folks, I will remind you, if you do want to support this community and this kind of like discourse, commentary, journalism, investigation, whatever you want to call it, if you want to help keep it on the air, you can subscribe to this program for $5 per month, totally free of charge. If you have an Amazon Prime account, you can get all the emotes of this channel, including, I believe Twitch is only JFK emote for this exact reason. It's $5 per month, folks. And the way that I'm able to continue doing this commentary for now, until I'm banned by the man, once they eventually come for me, the way I'm able to continue doing this commentary on this program is through the generosity of people in this community. And I've got to make the little number go up. I've got to make that little number go up every single day. That's the only thing I can do. I mean, that's all. That's the thing about our allegedly free, supposedly free social media platforms. You can talk about whatever you want. Ultimately, I got to just make that number go up, though. That's the ultimate. That's what it's all about. Gift your loved ones a sub to the Rob Rousseau Show this Christmas. Make sure they know back and to the left. That's right. And I think we need to go front and to the left politically. I'm going to workshop that one. Twitter should put an option to report on infected with woke mind virus. I'll immediately report Rob. They banned Carter. What did Carter get banned for? Carter's pretty harmless. Carter's a nice boy. What's Carter getting banned for? I'm sure Carter, and listen, this is not to be insulting to Carter. I'm sure Carter's out there fucking endorsing and promoting violence to people. Did you see any of that ban wave for Russian? No, I did not. Banned like permanently? Jesus. He thinks it might be because of comments he made on Chris Dorner. Maybe I should be thankful that this community has not grown more. I'm allowed to fly under the radar. They haven't quite come for me to silence me yet because I don't have quite the same level of reach as some others do. We operate in the shadows. Very intentional. That's right. It's actually good to me that I don't have as many subscribers or viewers. It's like that intentionally. Exactly, Marty. Thank you. Are you saying that they haven't been able to corner you, much like Dorner? Dorner, yeah, of course. Someone who I don't endorse in any way. It's on purpose. Thank you. It's why we got to have like a network of commie Twitch streamers. I don't know if you saw it, Johnny, but I did make you a recommended streamer of this channel. So get ready for your spot to blow up. You've ascended. You've gone to the next level. Oh. The clout sharing system works. The trickle down clout system works. It's not just a game. Okay, it's not just a catchphrase. This is real. This is real shit. Real shit, folks. Okay, so what should I do now? I should probably watch something. That was a pretty good little, I think, outline of my.
You can count on me.
Beliefs.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
So we tried the cherry Coke in my house, but the consensus is Dr. Pepper is much better. I mean, I probably prefer Diet Dr. Pepper to the cherry Coke Zero, but I think the cherry Coke Zero is in more of a nice little treat. It's kind of sweeter than most sodas that I enjoy. Thank you, Don Dark Sony, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate that. Thank you. No one knew who Lennon was before the old Rob bump. That's right. That's right. Exactly. That's absolutely right. Do we need to talk about the Elon stuff? The whole ban thing? We talked a little bit about that on the podcast as well. I don't want to just talk about stuff that we talked about on the podcast yesterday. This tweet is kind of ominous though, isn't it? What is this? It's really amazing Elon just doing all the things. He's complaining about Twitter making these executive decisions to silence or censor people. And then he's just now I'm doing the same thing, but because I don't like them. I think he's about to ban everyone who voted now on the should I unban journalist tweet. That would be great. Yeah, what is this? This is so ominous. He says now and soon, ladies and gentlemen, the coup de grace. What is that? What is this? This is some Bond villain shit. It's him flying his jet into the Pentagon. I mean, I was just going to say, I don't want to talk about anything violent or being anything like that, but it would be an interesting twist. Not to say that I would support this. It would be an interesting twist to the story if he was just going to kill himself. And that was the coup de grace. Sometimes over the last couple of days, it's felt like he's getting there, and if people just pushed a little further, he would get there fully. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Not that I would support it. I wouldn't, I think that would be a damn shame. It would be a damn shame if that were to happen. And I wouldn't be happy about it. I wouldn't laugh. I wouldn't find it funny in any way. And neither would you. I'm just saying it would be an interesting turn to the story if that's what he was referring to. It would be unexpected. I've never seen anyone more of a personification of a midlife crisis. No, for sure. Yeah, this is the tantrum to being booed. The being booed really escalated the whole mental breakdown, didn't it? Now he's paranoid. He's I'm going to be assassinated at any moment. I'm being doxxed because people are sharing my publicly available information about where my private jet is. That's doxing now. He's the most divorced guy on the planet, that's for sure. And people are like wondering, what happened? What happened? It's like, well, I think his family doesn't talk to him. His wife left him. And he's getting sucked in even further into this world of like right-wing conspiracy, as happens to many people. What if he emerges with an even whiter face, red chapped lips, a purple and green suit? The first thing I went to was Papa John for some reason. That's just the first thing I thought of. When he said, and now the coup de grace. That's the first thing I thought of was Papa John's ominous warning. That was the first thing I thought of. He's doing the unhinged Reddit mod thing of being like, you can't stop me. I'm the god in the machine. That's right. It is kind of entertaining that's what's going on in the last couple of weeks on Twitter, where it's everyone versus the bad forum mod. Right? It's like the ultimate example of that phenomenon. I forgot about sweaty Papa John saying he'd eaten 40 pizzas in the last 30 days. Look at that sick smile, too. Jesus. What is this coup de grace, though? I don't know. He's going to make the Kiwi Farms guy CEO. Just log off, Elon. Jesus Christ, man. Turn off your phone for a fucking week. Go on vacation. You can afford it. Just fucking stop looking at Twitter. Stop looking at the bad website. I've taken time. We all need to take time away sometimes. It's okay. It's okay to admit that. I've certainly needed to. In fact, I've been contemplating an upcoming extended social media break from both Twitter and this platform, and that's something that I'm considering for my own mental health reasons. You know, just to fucking log off, sir. Normally, a middle-aged man gets a divorce, ends up buying a jet ski, not a $44 billion social media platform. Well, especially when you offer to buy it for $44 billion, not really intending for it to go through or thinking that was going to happen, and then being forced to do so. Because you want to impress a bunch of like fucking 8chan freaks. You want to impress like Ian Miles Chong. And then notably, the company that you offer to buy is like, no, actually, we'll take you up on that. Yeah, we will take you up on that. He thinks about getting booed 24/7. No, he was as outlined earlier this week on this program. He was shaken up over that. He was shaken up. And still is. Why do him and Trump sound more and more alike? I mean, part of it is like being pulled into those same like weird, wacky right-wing communities and getting feedback and positive reinforcement from these very same people. The difference is, though, as I've outlined before, B-Rad, is that Trump is actually entertaining. And Elon tries so desperately to be funny, specifically, right? He doesn't just want to be admired by these people. He doesn't want to be accepted into these right-wing circles. He wants to be funny. He wants people to be like, you're funny and clever and interesting. And Trump is funny. Say no matter what else you want to say about the guy, he's very funny. And Elon is not. Elon is maybe the least funny person ever. You know, it's very possible. He's very possibly the least funniest person ever. He bought this social media platform. He's possibly the worst poster ever. Awful posts from this guy. Trump wants to be the heel. Elon needs to be liked. That's part of it too, yeah. But then you can see even when Elon realizes that he's not liked, he tries to lean into the heel thing, but he can't do it. He's not good at it. It just comes across as phony. He just comes across like a fucking dork. Taking Tesla stock to zero, which will maybe just crash the entire global economy. I might be able to crash the whole damn system. Says Cosmo, played by Ben Kingsley in the film Sneakers. Okay, Ron, I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Okay? You get no response. And what have I ever done for an empty-headed fucking dumb fuck like Hangman Adam Page? That's what if Elon was the CM Punk of billionaires. What did I ever do to have an empty-headed fucking dumb fuck like Matt Binder accuse me? You know, I don't clip that out of context. I like Matt. I was just doing an impression. That was Elon as CM Punk. That's the impression that I was just doing. I don't think Matt Binder is an empty-headed dumb fuck. Sexy Beast Kingsley is the best Kingsley. That is a very good Kingsley. That's true. He's fucking great in that. Elon burying Jack, even though he's left the company. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Jack shares a bank account with his mom. That really tells you all you need to know. God, I have fucking loved that Punk presser after All Out. What an iconic moment. This iconic pipe bomb wrestling moment happened and everyone got mad. All the marks got mad. They're like, of course I'm not a mark. I'm smart to this whole business. I'm not going to get worked by this guy. And they all just got worked, didn't they? One of my all-time favorite wrestling promos, that promo. Fucking tremendous. While he's eating the muffins, licking his fingers, eating the muffins, just covered in blood. Fucking fantastic. Lexi, thank you so much for another gifted sub. That's really kind of you, Lexi. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And again, if anyone else, I got another hour or so in this stream. I got another hour left in the stream, folks. And I got to make the number go up. Is it there? Yeah. There. I got to make the number go up. I still do. If I have to, I'll do the whole Caribbean Queen thing. That was a big hit yesterday. Bringing it back to season 1. I'll do it. Like we've been talking about this conspiracy stuff. We've been talking about Elon, this important business. I will just put on a MIDI of Caribbean Queen and dance weirdly to it if that's what you want. If that's what the community wants. If that's what's going to make the number go up. I will do it. I will do it. What a great song that is. Jesus. I'm not quite there yet, but I will do it. Or Easy Lover. I could do Easy Lover as well. Here comes Rob with the painted on jeans. That's actually funny because I'm wearing long johns right now. I'm wearing like skin tight long johns at the moment, which you could describe as being painted on. I'm wearing like a normal outfit on top with skin tight long johns on the bottom. That's my fit today. Call that the drive-through special. That's good. I like that. Standard Canadian winter fit. I am going to throw on some jeans first. Skin tight long johns every day. That's right. Canadian guy here in FedEx. Oh, that's good. You gotta wear those long johns. Are you like driving a FedEx truck right now? That's dangerous. It's also very snowy here in Montreal today, so even though I appreciate you tuning in for the stream,
you can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I appreciate you tuning in for the stream. We don't want to get dangerous here. Okay, you're in bed. Okay, good to know. Good to know. A fellow person that watches Rob while driving, I see. Sean, thank you. Thank you, Sean, for the gifted sub. I really appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Hang on one second.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Oh, shit. Oh, shit. What just happened? What the hell just happened? Alana, thank you so much. Thank you, Alana, for the 3 gifted subs. Very, very kind of you. Thank you. Best way to watch is while operating heavy machinery, I always say. That's right. That is absolutely right. Just trying to find my friend Nick's phone number while I'm looking at this to see if he wants to go to Avatar. Sometimes he watches the stream. Usually he makes himself known. But Nick, if you're watching right now, let me know if you want to go. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm going to text him right now. I'm making up for my earlier rain flub. Thank you, Alana. Thank you. I don't want to I don't want to downplay the seriousness of it, but I do appreciate you making an effort to make amends for that. Thank you. I'm just taking care of a couple texts here. This is the content that people love when I'm just texting. I'm just texting people while you look at me. I will do better. Thank you, Alana. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Maybe there's something I can watch now or something. Maybe I can take a break. I've been talking a lot. Let me see what we got here. Hey, speaking of while we're making chit chat here, did anyone catch the Ricky Starks versus MJF title match on AEW TV the other day? I loved that big the Ricky Starks promo from last week. That was fucking tremendous. I quite enjoy that Ricky Starks. He's got kind of an it factor. I didn't catch the match with MJF, but I'm wondering if any of you saw it. Don't all respond at the same time. All you AEW fans out there. What time do we got? It's 2:20. You know what? I think this could be a good video to watch. Considering some of the discussions we've had, maybe we can keep this going because there is an interview on Breakthrough News with Vincent Bevins, who wrote the book The Jakarta Method. Really an absolutely essential read if you want to understand the fucking barbarity, the barbarism of the United States foreign policy establishment and the CIA. And there's an interview with Vincent from Breakthrough News. Maybe since we spent the early part of the day talking about that kind of business, maybe that could be something we could take a look at as well. This video from Breakthrough News with Vincent Bevins. What do we think about that? Do you think that's a good idea? I feel like I've already kind of made up my mind on it, frankly. Take care, comrade. Social distancing. Thank you. Thank you for hanging out, as usual. Let's do it. Let's watch this clip with Rania Khalek from friend of the stream, Rania Khalek, and Vincent Bevins, who at one point agreed to come on this stream, and just through my own kind of, I just kind of, frankly, I fucked it up. I wanted to do it, and just I couldn't make the timing work. And I've been too embarrassed to approach Vincent Bevins again because of how I messed that up. Maybe one day he will come back he will come on the stream though. He could also be a friend of the stream. No, he didn't rescind. No, it's just I'm the one that messed it up, and then I never really followed through on it. But we talked about the role that the CIA played in the Third World, and especially following Kennedy's death. Again, The Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins is a book that everyone should read to really outline how horrific and violent that was, that project. So I think it's a good opportunity to take a look at this video from friend of the stream, Rania Khalek, Breakthrough News. And this is an interview with Jakarta Method author Vincent Bevins. Let's go. Let's do it.
Of a book I published a few years ago, which is about the intentional mass murder of left-wing movements around the world. It was not the first episode in this story, but the most important chapter in this.
Just going to get another beverage.
Is the mass murder of the Indonesian Communist Party in 1965 and 1966, which was the largest communist party outside of China and the Soviet Union, probably the largest democratic socialist movement in history.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Khalek, and this is Dispatches. At a time where it feels like the neoliberal order is fraying and there seem to be no new alternatives, the recent victory of Lula in Brazil over the neo-fascist Bolsonaro was a rare moment of inspiration for those struggling against imperialism in the Third World. Are imperialist powers less able to impose themselves on the global South using past tools of invasion, coups, and assassinations? The defeat of the coup in Bolivia and victory of Petro in Colombia show that the methods of the past aren't working, while interventions in the Middle East have caused destruction, but not necessarily regime change. Undesirable governments are undermined and sanctioned and sabotaged, causing the deaths of hundreds of thousands and the displacement of millions. During the Cold War, hundreds of thousands were killed by American-backed regimes, and popular movements or leaders seeking an independent path were crushed. On November 15, world leaders gathered in Indonesia for the G20 in their annual attempt to keep capitalism afloat. Left unsaid.
Thank you for letting us know, Slit Lip. Thanks for that information. We all really appreciate hearing about that. Thank you.
Was the fact that it was there in 1965 that the so-called Jakarta Method was established, named after the country's capital. The tools the US developed there were used repeatedly in the decades that followed. Now they no longer seem to work. Here to discuss past and present tools used by the United States against popular movements and revolutionary struggles seeking self-determination is Vincent Bevins, author of The Jakarta Method and a journalist who has worked in Asia and Latin America. But before we jump into it, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get a notification whenever we post new content. And if you appreciate this show, you can help it grow by becoming a patron at patreon.com/breakthroughnews. Or
people drive and do other things while watching TRRS. That's right.
Vincent, welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to finally have you on the show. I'm really excited to have this conversation. And, I think because of what's happening in the world right now with the World Cup, and I want to ask you about Brazil. Maybe before we get too deep into it, a good place to start would be Brazil and the World Cup.
Right.
A lot of Brazilian players are Bolsonaro supporters, right? And of course, like the most famous one of the most world famous players being Neymar, who actually, I didn't know this. I knew he was a Bolsonaro supporter, but I had just learned the other day during one of the Brazil games.
Okay. Is this, I put it on 1.25, it seems pretty fast.
He would dedicate his first goal to Bolsonaro in the World Cup.
That'll be fine.
I don't think he's going to get a chance to because he seems to be injured now, and I don't think he scored a goal the last game. But that said, you also have this other guy, Richarlison. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he actually supports Lula. He's one of the only players who openly does. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on how the politics of Brazil have played out in the World Cup, as Brazil's one of the best, most beloved teams around the world, and also vice versa?
Yeah, maybe I'm a bit too emotionally involved in the World Cup now that it started, but I would say that actually the goal scored against Serbia, the second goal scored by Richarlison, it's a very Brazilian name, was like politically and historically significant for the country of Brazil. Like, not only is Neymar a real hate figure of the anti-Bolsonarista, pro-democracy forces in Brazil. Neymar has been somebody that quite annoys a lot of Brazilians for many years now, but really coming out and supporting Bolsonaro made him a real object of hate for democracy forces in Brazil. I was on Avenida Paulista in downtown Sao Paulo right after Lula won a couple weeks ago.
You know what? For whatever reason, the 1.25 is good to play back videos quicker, but it's not really working for me in terms of like understanding the actual words. So I'm just going to go at normal speed.
So, and like one of the many chants that like the streets like spontaneously erupted into were Neymar vai ter que declarar, which is, hey Neymar, you're going to have to pay your because the accusation from Lula was that Bolsonaro had made some kind of a deal with Neymar.
0.5 speed. It's going to be like a Sigur Rós song.
Be lenient on his tax bill if he would support Bolsonaro. I don't know if we know that that's true, but like it mattered to Brazil that they played well in the first game, and it mattered that this like first goal, well, both goals were Richarlison, but this like the goal that was like the best of the World Cup so far and was really sort of the embodiment of everything that Brazilian soccer is supposed to be came from a man that had donated a lot of money to COVID vaccine research. He's somebody that like can kind of unite the country in the way that the yellow Brazil jersey used to before around 8 years ago with the 7-1 loss to Germany. The yellow jersey became to signify sort of top-down class warfare and a far-right movement. So to remind Brazil that the soccer team can stand for unity behind like a working class hero, again, I would, maybe I'm too involved, but I think it actually was quite a historic moment for Brazilian politics.
Yeah, and Neymar is such a crybaby. I felt that way even 4 years ago before I had any idea what this guy's politics were. And I know and the thing, it's funny, Brazil is like, I'm in Lebanon right now, and the World Cup is so popular here, like it is in much of the world, especially the global South. And Brazil is one of the most loved teams. Like it's Brazil, Argentina. Maybe that's the case around the world. Brazil, Argentina, and Germany, because they're historically such good teams. But especially Brazil. Mm-hmm. And it actually frustrated me this time around just because of the fact that there's so many of the players being like these Bolsonaro supporters. But then it was also interesting that, back when after Lula won, you had the Bolsonaro supporters trying to obstruct his victory, doing the blockades. Was there a role of football fans in actually preventing that?
Yeah, this is probably mythologized to some extent because it was such a great story, but it also did happen. I was again in Sao Paulo in the couple of days after Lula won, and around the country, Bolsonaro supporters, some of whom owned trucks, but others who just had cars, blocked the highways around the country. And this was significant not only because it would shut down all transportation in Brazil, but the highway police force had been notoriously pro-Bolsonaro. So they were one of the parts of the state which was most likely to support a coup if anybody were to support one. And so I couldn't go to Rio for a few days. It didn't seem like a coup was possible. It seemed like all of the actual elites that matter in Brazil had long ago decided to unite behind a sort of democratic transition, given the circumstances going into the election. But still, you couldn't get, the airport was shut down, was surrounded, you couldn't get across the country. And the group of people that literally opened up my path to Rio, because I was taking an overnight bus from Sao Paulo, was the organized fan base of Corinthians.
Yeah, Brandon told no coups, Jack.
It's Lula's favorite team. It's the biggest team in Sao Paulo, and it's a team that had a quite important role in the end of the dictatorship. So, like, this is a left-leaning.
As you know, I live in New Jersey. There are literally trucks with pro-Bolsonaro signs. Oh my goodness!
Good football hooligans that literally went out and cleared the roads, and it was like, yeah, it became a.
It was funny when the election was going on, seeing the political makeup of the Brazilian expat community in Miami, and how it was just like 90% for Bolsonaro. Still got to make sure we appeal to those reactionary Cubans and Brazilians in Miami, though. Never offend them. They're going to come along any moment now. Support the liberal establishment.
Again, sort of a significant moment in social media in Brazil, because everybody was able to sort of celebrate these like working class soccer fans going out there, and then the Bolsonarista supporters who were calling for a military coup, like immediately running away because they were scared of sort of actual tough guys.
Nice. I love to hear left-wing tough guys exist in this
Miami's
context.
a gathering place for unhinged people from all around the world. That's right.
But, you know,
the beauty
just
of America.
To like broaden it out a bit, I mean, when we talk about the victory of Lula, this is, of course, coming after a few other victories across the region, some surprise victories, for example, like Gustavo Petro in Colombia. And I'm curious if you see the victories of like Lula and Petro as a sign that the U.S. is less able to obstruct these sort of popular leftist movements the way it has been in the past. Because so far, you know, the U.S. has not done anything, as far as we know, to try to get in the way, especially with Gustavo Petro, which is happening in a country that, like, until now has been historically in the hands of very pro-U.S., very right-wing people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the big question hanging over the continent, South America, for among people like me is this a second pink tide? So the narrative goes that at the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the 21st century, there was a number of left-wing leaders elected across South America, some of whom stayed friendly with Washington, some of whom did not, especially Hugo Chavez after the U.S.-backed coup attempt in 2002. This became a permanent site of contention between Washington and Venezuela, and this remains the case. And then a lot of these, those countries fell to the right again, to center-right forces in the intervening years, partially because sort of democracy was sort of back, and you had the natural left-to-right sort of pendulum swing that you would see in a region that was not beset by the kind of very, very active and rampant intervention that you saw in the Cold War. But then also in a place like Brazil, you had the removal of Dilma Rousseff in 2016 in a parliamentary impeachment, an impeachment vote in Congress that was very clearly motivated by political considerations, not the kind of crimes that she was accused of. The people that voted to remove her were guilty of much more corruption than she was ever accused of. And then you had Lula put in jail in 2018.
Sorry, I don't want to make fun of Rania. You know, we love Rania, friend of the show. It does seem like for the last 30 seconds there, she was not thinking that was that she was going to make, like it was going to be a close up or something. You got one, Rania, over the last like 30 seconds is like yawning.
Brazil,
you had pulling weird faces.
Removal of Dilma Rousseff in 2016.
You can have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Sorry, just wanted to get the share option off my screen.
Oh, thank you, Matt. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the 16 months tier 1. I appreciate it. People don't need to worry about interrupting with subs, please. I'll look past it this one time, I guess. Sorry to call it. I'm sorry to make fun of Rania. Okay, we love Rania, but this was quite funny though.
In a parliamentary impeachment, an impeachment vote in Congress that was very clearly motivated by political considerations, not the kind of crimes that she was accused of. The people that voted to remove her,
I'm sorry,
were
Rania.
guilty of much more corruption than she was ever accused of. And then you had Lula put in jail in 2018.
I'm sorry, Rania.
in the year that he was running against Bolsonaro, at the moment that he was leading the polls in Brazil. So in the case of Brazil, the largest country in the hemisphere, you have quite an interesting dynamic emerging now where for many years, the Lula and the PT, the Workers' Party in Brazil, had accused Washington of being partially responsible for the far right turn in Brazil, saying that...
Oh my goodness, Outrun. Oh my goodness. Marty, thank you so much. Marty.
Test tip alert.
Thank you for the it's literally 1984. It is literally 1984. Thank you, Marty. I really appreciate that. Thank you. George Orwell, 1984. This is fucked up.
The Lava Jato investigation had collaborated closely with the Justice Department, that they wanted to...
The Lava Jato operation, that was the soft coup, which was endorsed by the Obama administration, at least like implicitly endorsed by the Obama administration, that got rid of Dilma Rousseff and ended with Lula getting put in jail.
And
we
all of that,
use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Never bad talk Rania TRRS Robknife TRRS Robknife TRRS Robknife.
Thank you, Dimitri. I agree that people shouldn't bad talk Rania. I was simply doing some playful ribbing. Okay, big difference. Big difference. And in fact, I have defended Rania on multiple occasions because people say all kinds of nasty things about her sometimes because of certain political stances that she's taken, bold political stances, especially when it comes to imperialism and foreign policy. I've been right there defending Rania each step of the way, and that's why she's a friend of the stream. And I'm just engaging in a little friendly ribbing. That's all. I think anyone that bad talks Rania should just be given money until they shut up. Thank you, Marty. Marty, I'm gonna start talking to you like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Don't get me wrong, I love Ronnie. I just think your producer absolutely did her dirty. I definitely think, I'm not sure Ronnie was expecting to make it into the video.
To that story, and there's a lot that still I think needs to be investigated in the future. But then also, in the last 6 to 8 to 10 months, it appeared that the Biden administration had made it very, very clear that they would not back a Bolsonarista bid for power, that they were making it very clear publicly and privately,
That's
and
right, Sam.
intentionally leaking to the press that they were putting pressure on Bolsonaro to accept the results of the election. So you'll have a very interesting moment where now the two most powerful leaders in the Western Hemisphere, Joe Biden and Lula, have this kind of checkered history where Lula has claimed and has believed that the reason he was in jail was partially because of U.S. intervention. Lula's brother famously
heavy is that wears the crown. Don't I know
dictatorship, when it was backed very fervently by the United States, but also this kind of conditional, temporary, tactical, anti-Bolsonarista alliance between some parts of the U.S. State and democratic forces in Brazil, and then he will try to hold that together. I believe Lula, using the Amazon and internationally coordinated efforts on climate change to use the goodwill that exists outside of the country. But it's a very interesting back and forth between rampant intervention and murderous, really, repression backed by the United States during the Cold War, a kind of flowering of center-left and left-wing governments that somehow fell to their own due to their own mistakes and somehow experienced active intervention from abroad, and now a new crop of leaders that are coming into power, I believe, in a much more difficult international situation, because 2022 is a much more difficult year for the global economy than 2003 was, the first time that Lula took over, somehow with the tactical support, or at least the declaration from the United States that they would not intervene or countenance any intervention in Brazilian democracy.
Yeah, like I was saying, big difference considering that Brandon put the kibosh on any potential Bolsonaro coup happening. Let's not give Brandon too much credit, considering the role that Brandon himself and the Obama administration played in the soft coup 10 years ago, which led to Bolsonaro being elected in the first place. Let's not give based Brandon too much credit on that. They were directly implicated in Lula's original arrest and the takedown of Dilma Rousseff, which led to Bolsonaro.
Yeah, it really is a big question in terms
both eyes on
of
Peru.
like
exactly
whether we're
right.
going to see that pendulum shift back to the right. And because like you said, it's 2022, there's not as much money. The global economy is like in this horrible kind of post-pandemic, now post-war in Ukraine.
Brandon also knows there was too many eyes on Brazil and that the OAS this past year was a disaster.
So it's going to be very difficult to
true.
deliver on promises if you're a left-wing leader. And then, of course, there's always the potential for American sabotage in these kinds of situations, especially if we end up with like another Trump presidency. Or, of course, that could happen during a Democratic presidency, as it did under Obama.
There we go.
Last time around.
This is why she's a friend of the program, right? Same wavelength.
There were so many U.S.-backed sabotage efforts during Obama.
Lula literally, Jesus, the pause faces. I'm doing Rania dirty now today. Lula literally spent the whole election victory night retweeting foreign leaders as a sign of certainty. Yeah, that's smart, isn't it? That's smart.
But why do you think, like you mentioned the fact that the U.S. basically made it clear, and it wasn't just the U.S. In stuff you've written about this, you also mentioned other embassies.
We'll see how things progress.
Western embassies made it very clear across Brazil to Bolsonaro that
if Lula, sorry to keep interrupting, if Lula does, act as a someone that's going to continue and further the emergence of that kind of like multipolar world that America is struggling against right now, if he's going to really do anything meaningful to counteract U.S. hegemony in Latin America or the rest of the world, then we'll see how the U.S. government proceeds, right? As we know, Lula, even though he's been elected, still has huge institutional obstacles in enacting any kind of an agenda. So that's part of it as well. It's not much of a threat yet for them to escalate to that level. Yeah, got to play a fine line so he doesn't get Maduro'd. Exactly.
They were not going to back him contesting the election, right? But they were going to support a Lula win if Lula won. And Lula did win. But like, why is that the case? Why did Western governments seem to support Lula this time around after abandoning him and actually really playing a huge role, especially the U.S., in his jailing? Why did they like say the thing that I just time said. Around? What is it about Bolsonaro that they, I guess, are against? Because they, they weren't so against him when he won the first time.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there's the answer is multifaceted. But yeah, not only did the embassies of the international community plan to recognize a Lula win, they had like pre-written their tweets so they could hit tweet like at the moment the results came in. So Lula on the night of the election just spent all night just retweeting support from everyone around the world. And I said on
there we go.
that social network that night.
And now
he's
she's
not like
off
doing
screen.
a victory
Yeah.
dance. He's like saying like, look, the world is recognizing that I won. Like you can't contest this. Like after Germany,
we're ahead of the game.
and Spain and Uruguay, and after they all come out in support of this democratic result, you can't contest that.
So we got some professional journalists and professional authors and, the heavy hitters that we're watching. And me and you, chat, we're one step ahead still. We know we're with the program.
Why did things change from 2018 to 2022? I think there's 3 answers if I could remember them all. The first and like I think domestically oriented answer is that to take like the oversimplified, vulgar Marxist interpretation of what Bolsonaro's role was.
This is what happens over and over in history. Like in Afghanistan, first they feed fanatics, and a few years later they become in trouble. Then they fight against them, like we're going to see in the inevitable Azov War of the 2030s, right? Lamport, or maybe even sooner, maybe like 2028. That's what the U.S. government's going to be up to. That just feels so inevitable. And it's amazing being here in 2022, and saying that these things are going to happen and have people be like, oh, shut up. Don't say that. You love Putin. Don't talk about how you're going to have to fight these extremists in Ukraine. That's ridiculous. And that's the reaction. And then when this moment inevitably comes, which we all know it will, no one's going to acknowledge that. And the very same people that were doing the shouting in the first place are going to be the same ones fucking lecturing us about we have to support our boys fighting the evil Ukrainian bad guys. God damn it. It's just infuriating. This is the curse This is the blessing and the curse of dialectical materialism.
He did a poor job of managing the interests of the national bourgeoisie. Like, he didn't do a very good job taking care of Brazilian elites. It became clear at some point that he was not good at running the economy. And you can't really establish a dictatorship in South America, which he would have loved to do. You can't establish a far-right government in South America without taking care of the interests of national economic.
Look at the coverage of John McCain and the Syrian rebels. Those Syrian rebels turned out to be ISIS. Or look at the footage of John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Amy Klobuchar, as we have on a number of occasions, hanging out with those Azov guys, being like, in 2015, being like, we'll get you whatever you need. Take the fight to the Russians. We need to escalate this fight with the Russians. And then you say, like, this. I think this is a proxy war. I think this is the Russians and the Ukrainians in this case are kind of a U.S. proxy. And people say, what are you talking about? What? That's Putin propaganda, sir. You're banned from social media for saying that. That's what they say. It's really bizarre, isn't it? It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. They started turning into Hulk Hogan. That's
we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you, Dimitri, for the 100 friend coin. Let's be fair to our festering sack of shit. Bolsonaro, he was fighting COVID like 52 times in his term. That's true, yeah. He only had like 27 different strains of COVID, so. Anyway, it's just very frustrating having this the last year, seeing this discourse play out and knowing exactly what's going to happen and still just, people not listening to you. You folks listen to me, though, and I appreciate that.
Elites, that's the whole point, right? So he proved to the people that matter in Brazil and their business partners around the world that, yes, he was able to deliver sort of some hard neoliberal reform. Yes, he said all the right things about sort of helping the markets, right, which means like the local financial class. But he was just not very good at taking care of their interests. And so it became clear by the beginning of 2022 that group of people, Faria Lima, like that's the Brazil's version of Wall Street, would not back a coup to keep him in against Lula. It was not worth it to keep this particular bad steward of the Brazilian economy in power against a Lula that they had sort of dealt with before. They knew that he would be, there would be some problems, but they could sort of do this old dance and try to influence him, which is what you're seeing play out now. Part two, and I think this is in sort of the ideological space, especially in the US, is that the Bolsonaro family declared themselves very, very, very loyal to the Trump movement. Like they came out in a way that even by the standards of the South American far right was strangely obsequious to the Trump family. So in ways which could be helpful to Brazil, but also damaging in the long term, you already sort of mentioned
there
what
you go.
happens if a Republican comes back into power.
Johnny.
In the U.S. political discourse, the Bolsonaro movement became very closely allied with Trumpism. So you got kind of, if Bolsonarismo is seen as a Trumpist movement in South America, it makes domestic political sense for Biden to be opposed to it. It's an easy win for Biden to stand up loudly and say, "Screw this guy down in South America. He's destroying the Amazon. He's a far right."
It's Vincent Bevins,
leader, and he's dangerous. It made sense for domestic political reasons. And then number three, there's the question of the environment.
I'm not actually talking to him right
global
now.
Community, North Atlantic countries, they do want some kind of action taken on the Amazon. And Bolsonaro made it very clear that not only was he going to do the opposite, encourage his supporters to cut down and burn as much as possible, that he was going to sort of like raise both middle fingers to any international forum that might try.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to
the countries
talk
of
you
Europe
through all
were
this.
very eager to have anybody that would at least pretend that would like somehow participate in this international movement. So I think those three things come together. But they also can all be sort of fragile if you look at, the road that Lula faces ahead. Lula is in a situation where the domestic opposition is incredibly strong.
Dimitri, thank you very much for the gifted sub. Thank you, Dimitri.
The financial elites in Brazil are already putting huge amounts of pressure on Lula to do what they think that he should, which means, to take care of their interests first. they have a lot of ways to contest his real power if they were to choose to do so. And then, yeah, again, what the big question is, what happens if the Republic comes back in 2 years? Because then now, Bolsonaro has in the months in which it seemed clear even to him that he was probably, that he had to come up with a plan B. He brought Tucker Carlson into Brazil. He really made a direct appeal to the sort of Fox News portion of the United States, and I think this makes sense as a long-term strategy, which is, if I'm out of power, I want to have an alliance with the second party or one of the two major parties in the strongest country in the world. So so the reasons for that switch also underline the degree to which things can be difficult for Lula going forward.
Yeah, I get like a fellowship at the Heritage Foundation.
I think it's totally
public office.
I've said a long time ago, I think that it's totally possible that the Bolsonaros end up like living in Florida and like living off of the sort of right-wing industrial complex. Like, I don't think that's out of the question.
It is. I mean, it is. It's very. I was going to ask you. Well, I was actually going to ask you. It is a very lucrative complex you just described, but I was going to ask you, what do you think will happen to his sons now?
So his sons are in. So his sons his sons are in Congress. So I think it's at some point it became clear to Jair Bolsonaro, president, that he wanted to stay in power, but also really wanted to stay out of jail. I mean, it's quite clear that this family has committed a range of crimes before and during the presidency. So the sons have the benefit of a special legal status as members of Congress. Jair Bolsonaro does not. But because of the very strong result for Bolsonarista candidates and the strong block that Bolsonarismo will have in Congress and in state governments, I think things look a little bit more secure for him in the short term. He has enough people sort of batting for him, at least ostensibly at this moment, that it doesn't seem like he would have to like flee or face the possibility of immediate prosecution. And then a lot of this happens behind the scenes too. I mean, I speak to the Lula campaign fairly often. This is something they don't usually want to talk about, but the question is, does it make more sense to go after Bolsonaro, or does it make more sense to just let him fade away? Which is it more tactically advantageous to prosecute Jair Bolsonaro, or just to like let it go away? And of course, it's not technically up to him, but right. Well, there's this, and these are the people that stopped my not that I matter, but shut down the roads in Brazil that are willing to take violent action, perhaps to defend the person they believe to be their leader. So yeah, it could be dangerous to inflame the sort of passions.
Well, I do want to ask you as well, because, you've reported from so many different parts of the world, obviously not just Latin America. So I would love to get your take on this. In this world that we're in right now, where neoliberalism really dominates, right? And most countries have essentially surrendered or had integrated into this American-led capitalism. Why do you think it is that Latin America seems to be one of the only places where the left can achieve popular mobilization and win elections? Like, you don't really see that happening anywhere else.
Well, good question.
It's a good question. I think Latin America is unique for a couple reasons with relationship to the rest of the global South. Latin America is a part of the world which emerges very, very deeply from the Western post-Enlightenment ideological tradition. So everything that happens in Latin America is legible to people from North America or Western Europe, because they have the same left-right spectrum. This is not the case in Southeast Asia and much of Africa, right? So they have the same sort of ideological categories, the same set of terms to describe everything that happens. So it's very easy for us to look down there and say, oh, that's the left candidate, that's the right candidate. The left candidate stands for things that are very similar to what the Western European or North American left used to stand for before they were sort of eviscerated. I think that's one part of the answer. Another part of the answer is that there's this historical debt, this memory of historical repression during the Cold War, this idea, which is very common, not only amongst the left, but that in the 20th century, there were certain things that this region wanted to do there were certain ways that this region wanted to advance into a advanced democratic order, and were stopped from doing so by violent U.S. intervention. The idea that the left was the good guys in the Cold War is quite widespread. Bolsonaro and people like that are trying to contest that, saying, "Oh, this has all been a myth." But it's not just the radical left that looks back and says, we were on a path to normal sort of, I mean, even, in many cases, the path that was disrupted by violent intervention coming from the North was just the path to like sort of liberal capitalism. Even that was stopped and intercepted with violent intervention. And so the idea that this is something we've been wanting to do, we've been trying to establish European-like relations between the classes for a century, but Uncle Sam has been getting in the way violently, leads to this sort of repressed desire that when the obstacles removed, or at least changed, or is weakened, or global conditions are transformed, I think it's normal to see the people that stand for that legacy win elections. And again, like so many of the leaders that come, even in the first and the second wave of the Pink Tide, are either linked to that repressed left movement in the 20th century, or like literally were in it, like literally were guerrillas, literally were tortured by a U.S. backed dictatorship.
Right.
And I think that makes a lot of sense if you study Latin American history.
That's a good point. And now I'm about to give an amazing segue. Do you think another reason
you
for
can
this?
count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Basically, the premise of the question I asked you, where like you have,
I'm trying to
these left mobilizations.
I'm trying to pause it and not give Ronnie a terrible pause face. Christine Doe, thank you for the 2 gifted subs. Thank you, Christine. Very, very kind of you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
In Latin America, unlike in other parts of the world, do you think another reason for that might also be because the U.S. succeeded in permanently defeating some of those movements in other places? And would you say, Vincent, that that's due in many ways to the Jakarta method? And how would you define that, since you wrote a book about it? That's my segue.
Yeah, so the Jakarta method, that's great, fantastic. Yeah, so the Jakarta method is the title of a book I published a few years ago, which is about
you got to read the Jakarta method,
intentional mass murder of left-wing movements around the world. It was not the first
essential
episode in this story, but the most important chapter in this story is the mass murder of the Indonesian Communist Party in 1965 and 1966, which was the largest communist party outside of China and the Soviet Union, probably the largest democratic socialist movement in history. And I found that in at least 22 countries around the world, the intentional mass murder of leftists, people accused of being leftists, or perceived enemies of nascent US-backed authoritarian capitalist regimes, was put in place. And I believe this is a really important part of the construction of the particular type of hegemony that the U.S. ends up achieving in the 20th century. And
much of which happened post-JFK assassination. Worth reading, worth pointing out, right? To tie it together with what we were talking about earlier. I think JFK looms large over the Jakarta method. And Bevins, because he's like an actual journalist and doesn't want to like get into the kind of like conspiratorial or speculatory stuff, you can really read the book and see the difference between the JFK's vision for the post-colonial third world and what ended up actually happening, and the big differences between these two things. So even though JFK never says anything specifically about who assassinated JFK and why, it leaves you still, I think, asking that question, just because of the vast difference in what JFK's ideas were when it came to this. How the United States should relate to places like Indonesia and Vietnam and other places in the third world and these post-colonial movements, and what ended up happening after he was taken out of the picture. And that's the painful thing about the book. I would recommend it to anyone, but it's physically painful to read. Like Outrun is saying, it's incredibly sad. And the evil thing that Bevins does in this book is spend the first almost third of the book, I think, really building up the feeling of hope and optimism and opportunity that was pervasive in these regions in the post-war period, in the post-colonial period, and how ruthlessly and violently it was just obliterated by U.S. imperialism. It is truly it's heart-wrenching to think about the possible world that was kind of on the horizon, and the way that was that future was just like not allowed to pass. And the just like I said, just the ruthlessness with which it was completely crushed by the United States intelligence community and Western imperialism. It's absolutely horrendous. Obama's mom and stepdad. That's right. Obama's mom was hanging out in Indonesia after this. Yeah, very true.
The construction of the particular type of globalization that we got as we entered the 21st century. So the contrast between a place like Indonesia and in Latin America is really striking, because in Indonesia you had the
I don't remember
US
that part, Johnny.
The murder of
Sometimes you don't want to scare the
people,
normies,
perhaps more,
okay?
perhaps less. We don't know, because there's
I don't want to speak for Vincent Bevins. Sometimes you want to make sure the normies' concerns are being listened to. I don't agree personally, but I think some people have to.
There's never been the kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission that we did have in places like Chile, Argentina, Brazil, to some lesser extent.
Exactly, Marty.
America.
Yeah, for sure. Doesn't look like
not only
anything
did
to
you
me.
not have this kind of investigation of the
I agree.
Each victim,
Johnny,
and each perpetrator, and some kind of reparations or restitution or national apology, you still have the dominant narrative in Indonesia being that they deserve to be killed, essentially. And the people that I met researching the book, not only suffered horribly in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, they're still marginalized and stigmatized for being part of a movement, even though it was a movement that would have won an election if it were allowed to take place, if 25% of the country was somehow affiliated with the party. They're still stigmatized as being somehow satanic or evil or opposed to the very nature of what Indonesia is. So the question of why you get this page turned in Latin America but not in Indonesia is an interesting one, and I don't think we know the answer entirely. The Indonesian military remains very powerful. When Jokowi, the current president of Indonesia, who's is often compared to Obama, and I think this comparison makes sense, but he also looks a lot like Obama, like they have this exact same face structure. And Obama spent part of his childhood in Jakarta because of the mass murder. His stepfather was called back to Indonesia because of this rupture in Brazilian.
We're one step ahead of the game again.
Society. So Jokowi, when he won election, he was the first sort of person outside of the military or traditional oligarchical elite to win an election since the fall of the dictatorship. A lot of people thought that he would oversee some kind of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, some kind of reparations. The community of survivors that I got to know quite well thought that perhaps this would happen. He did not. He immediately backed away from any of this, and the best speculation seems to be that he's afraid of the power of the Indonesian military. They're able to pull this sort of anti-communist card on him now, just as they did against the left in 1965. And Bolsonaro is somebody who, effectively pulled the same card. His script is also one which is pulled from the depths of the Cold War in Brazil in the 1970s and in Chile in the 1970s. The word Jakarta came to signify the intentional mass murder of leftists and accused leftists. A new book just came out in Brazil by a really good Brazilian journalist, and he told me at the launch that he found that Lula's brother was arrested and tortured as part of Operation Jakarta in Brazil. It was actually, it didn't get fully implemented in Brazil, but these are all linked to traumatic moments in the Cold War, in which, as I said, the United States intervened in order to stop a particular type of post-colonial nation from emerging and to shape outcomes in a way which ultimately led to a particular type of U.S.-led hegemony. So yes, certainly in the case of Indonesia and Southeast Asia, the question is and then now we have the Philippines, the second largest country in the region by population, which has elected the son of the U.S.-backed dictator from the Cold War. Ferdinand Marcos, good friend of the Reagan family.
You can count on me. You're gonna have a good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Reporting.
Aloha, comrades. Season's greetings and happy birthday to me. TRRS drums.
Bark Eater J, thank you so much for the 12 months of Tier 1. One entire year of Tier 1 from Bark Eater J. And happy birthday to you. And what a great way to celebrate is by subscribing to this program. I couldn't agree with that chosen celebration anymore. Bark Eater, happy birthday. Thank you for coming to hang out. And if anyone else wants to celebrate Bark Eater's birthday by subscribing to the channel or gifting subs to the channel, you're more than welcome. What better way to show Bark Eater that you support their birthday and you want to wish them a happy birthday? So I don't want to, put too many ideas in your head here. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying, oh, my birthday here, not my actual birthday. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense considering it's 12 months. So my happy birthday wishes are rescinded. I take back my happy birthday. No, it's your birthday. I take it back. But I still think people should subscribe to the channel as well. Crimson, thank you. Thank you, Crimson. I still think, regardless of whose birthday it is, listen, it's someone's birthday. It's someone's birthday out there. You might be here, you might be in the chat. There's probably many people whose birthday it is right now. And what better way to celebrate that is by subscribing or by gifting subs in this channel. Mine is in 2 days. Oh, shit. Someone out there is getting older. That's right. That's very soon, Sean. Equal opportunity birthday celebrator. I'm simply saying to subscribe to this program and help me make my number go up. Where all our numbers are going up, okay? It's a little thing called mortality, okay? It's a little thing called mortality, and you can actually make my other number go up, the number down there at the bottom of the screen. You can make that go up as well. Happy birthday to Crimson Tinted as well. It's everyone's birthday.
It came out of the Philippines, led to the conclusion that essentially the Marcos family had so much money from the dictatorship. They had stolen so much money in the 20th century that they were sort of able to buy off TikTok influencers and like the entire Philippine social media infrastructure. There's some great reporting on this if you look this up. That you could make a small amount of money, not a small amount to us, perhaps those of us from the United States or Western Europe, but significant money for a Filipino to support Bongbong Marcos on TikTok. And this is money that, of course, came from these generative moments in the Cold War, where the U.S. really shaped the outcome of state formation in the global South.
Right? You could really call it like genocide of a political movement if that word applies to a political movement. I'm not sure if it does, but in the case of Indonesia, some people use politicide. Yeah.
Some people like to use politicide. Some people like to call Indonesia a genocide. Yeah.
Well, what was the? I don't know if the audio dropped off and you already said it, but what was the ultimate estimate of how many people were killed, in across Indonesia that were a part of the Indonesia?
In Indonesia, in Indonesia, the estimate that I use is approximately 1 million people. One general claimed that they had killed 3 million people, but he seemed to have been perhaps bragging. Another estimate is 500,000 to 1 million. But again, the really
horrendous,
horrible reality behind that guessing game that we're forced to play is that nobody ever showed up and did an investigation. There was never a UN sort of investigation into what happened. There was never a giant, global campaign to figure out exactly who had been killed, because it wouldn't be that hard, right? And I believe that part of the reason we do not have that in a place like Indonesia is because it was good for the rising
good for
power.
business.
It was good for the United States, which was taking its role.
Cancel all birthdays
in a sense,
figure out what the hell's going on.
Nation in history, and to a large extent, shapes our narratives of the Cold War to this day.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm curious because you worked for a lot of mainstream publications. Hardly like not like you did. It's not like you were like I know you've written for Jacobin now, but it's not like that was like your main thing before. Like you were quite, and you still write for a lot of mainstream publications, which is great. So I guess my question for you is, how did you learn about the Jakarta method, and what motivated you to write that particular book?
Yeah, no, I've actually only ever in my entire career written for mainstream corporate media. I was interviewed by Jacobin a couple of times, but I'm like my most recent stuff.
I'm sorry. I thought you'd actually. I thought maybe they published. I assumed it was like your.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. But to this day, like my entire career has been basically mainstream journalism. I went to Indonesia to work for the Washington Post to cover Southeast Asia for the Washington Post. My most recent stuff on Brazil has been either for New York Magazine or the New York Review of Books. I went to Southeast Asia not like looking for evidence of U.S. crimes. I went there just to cover the region as a correspondent for the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos bought the paper, so after my time in Brazil, they had some money to expand their coverage. That's basically the story. But when I got there, and I chose to be based in Jakarta, it's the most populous. Indonesia is the most populous country in the region. It's the fourth largest country in the world by population. And when I got there, it just became clear that there was nothing you could do without uncovering the legacy of this massacre in 1965. You couldn't tell the story of Indonesia in, it was 2017 at the time, without understanding what had happened in 1965. No matter where you looked, it was lurking below the surface. It had generated so much of contemporary history, or sort of contemporary political and social situation, but had been intentionally repressed and misrepresented, that you couldn't do the job that I was supposed to do responsibly without looking at that episode. And so as I got deeper and deeper, I realized there could be a book there, and then I eventually put aside entirely the work of sort of day-to-day news correspondence and just worked on that for years.
It is, and like talking about the world that was possibly emerging, that was crushed so ruthlessly. I mean, it's really like explicitly talking about socialism, like the idea of Vietnam and the whole domino effect, the domino theory or whatever. Which, when you realize, like, without the interference, like that's the really astounding thing. Not just when it comes to Indonesia, but to think about the world that could have emerged in the post-colonial world was socialist, right? The world emerging in the third world after World War II was socialist. And just to think about the world that could have developed without that interference, without the coups, without the invasions, the partitioning, the wars, the torture and assassination programs, the destabilization, the sanctions, and all these little tricks that the Western imperialism used to crush these movements. But you'd have socialist China. If Lumumba hadn't been assassinated, Africa as well, a lot of these post-colonial nations. You'd have China, Korea would be socialist. You'd have a socialist bloc, at least in China, Korea, Vietnam, and Indonesia, which is just like a massive number of like the global population, especially in Southeast Asia. And then, you have places like Burkina Faso and Congo and Africa and these post-colonial movements. You've got all these places in Latin America where they had these vibrant socialist movements that were also crushed using this kind of Jakarta method. Like Chile is the ultimate example of that. Like, it's really astounding to think about how that's the way things were developing. Things, especially in the global South, in the third world, in these post-colonial movements, were heading in the socialist direction. Fucking Italy probably would be communist. Yeah, like it's truly amazing to think about the world that we would be living in today had this massive campaign of repression and terror and subversion and destruction and mass murder, frankly, hadn't been carried out with the United States government at the head of that, and of course with being assisted with all the other Western countries such as Canada and the UK and Australia and France and all these other predominantly white Western countries that couldn't allow that to happen under any circumstances, couldn't allow this post-colonial world of socialism and solidarity to emerge. It's really astounding to think about how different the world would be without that, and it's heartbreaking to think of how we're living in the result of that, by the way, as well, with the deteriorating economic conditions of today, not just in the West, but like around the world, the deteriorating environment, the wars, the drug kingpins and drug cartels running all the, it's sick. It's sick, the world that they fought and killed and tortured and maimed and destabilized and overthrew to ensure that the world that we live in today is the world that emerged from that, rather than a system of global solidarity, of world peace, of anti-colonialism, of socialism. It's really just astounding to try and wrap your mind around what the world that was prevented from being born in that post-war period. And if Mao is correct, I believe it was Mao that talked about it. Don't get on my ass too hard about this, but talked about how that socialism grew out of World War II. It was ruthlessly crushed in many of these cases, but it wasn't killed. And it may be a reality that it's going to take World War III is going to be the thing that leads ultimately to the triumph of this movement. We'll see. It would be nice if, it started in World War I. That's true. It started out of World War I with the Russian Revolution and the USSR. It increased in World War II with China, and now that's where we're headed now, is to get the ultimate test of where we go after that inevitably. It spirals into another global conflict, which sometimes it seems like we're just right on the doorstep of. Yeah, that's true. And you could argue even earlier with the Haitian Revolution. I mean, as Kwame Ture talked about, even though, Marx and Lenin and Engels wrote about socialism, it's not that they were creating or inventing these things. They were simply scientifically observing these things, observing capitalism, observing colonialism, seeing how they worked, seeing how they operated, and just writing down what it was. That's why it's a science, right? They didn't invent it. They didn't invent socialism. But that's an important point as well.
To try to create a book that would tell the story in a way that was intelligible to, that was written for a regular people, but that also was quite loyal to the facts on the ground and based on sort of granular reporting and interviews with the survivors.
So do you think that in some ways, because the last 30 years or last 20 years or so, I should say, you haven't had there's nothing comparable to not just what happened in Jakarta in the 60s, but even the sort of copycats of that in other places in the world. There's nothing really comparable to it in more recent times. I mean, yes, the US has backed atrocities. You could use the Iraq War as one, the war in Afghanistan. I mean,
Reading Jakarta Method, Washington Bullets, and The Face of Imperialism in the same week honestly gave me a 2-week depression, but it also motivated me because it shows how much potential we have and that we will win. I hope that you are right, Relic. I really, really do. Sometimes I believe it. Sometimes I believe it. Sometimes I'm more cynical about things. But I hope you're right.
Lots of people were killed, but that was the sort of typical warfare we're used to. And of course, there's small versions of the U.S. backing right-wing forces here or there that commit atrocities, but not to the same scale.
I remember sometimes as well, it's not just about us. It's not just about the West, but where we're talking about the Jakarta Method, you're talking about the global South, right? Where's that going? And ultimately, I think even though America has done everything to crush these movements of solidarity, of these socialist anti-colonial movements, ultimately I think that's where the third world is going, despite everything America's done. Maybe in the West, are we going to have a socialist revolution? I don't really think so, frankly. I would like to be wrong about it. I don't really think so. But ultimately, I think that is where the third world is going to end up, in spite of all the immense challenges and all the immense efforts that the bloodthirsty evil monsters in the United States foreign policy establishment and the security state, the deep state, the intelligence community have done to stop it from happening.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, do you think it's no longer effective in the modern era to have a Jakarta method style, like just mass murdering campaign of like an entire movement because of maybe media coverage or the popular democratic outrage you might have over abuses like that? Does that make these methods no longer possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, the first thing I would say is that a lot of people have died in Yemen in the last few years, and there hasn't seemed to be a huge amount of media or democratic outrage in the United States, which is maybe a good way to get into the longer answer, because it's a complex question. I think the answer is complex. One of the things that I tried to get across in this book, the Jakarta Method, one thing that I came across when I was
that's right, Johnny. That's I think that's where I land on these things.
The 20th century is it seems that the United States was really kind of going through a learning process as to how to be the superpower in a world which is no longer connected through formal empire, right? So at the end of World War II, the United States emerges as
a socialist revolution in the West. And that first, we are the Nazis. We're the Fourth Reich. I'm sorry to say, that house of Caucasianism is going to have to be overrun by the People's Army. It do be like that, Dimitri. It's true. The capitalists are going to fuck the whole thing up. That's the thing. And I think the people that are the powerful people and the controlling that are the elites that in the West would rather blow up themselves and the entire world than allow that future to come to pass, and probably will. But we'll see what emerges out of that if they inevitably try.
The most powerful country in human history, and I think kind of falls into a world historical space that was created by centuries of European formal colonialism, formal empire. So the United States in the second half of the 20th century wants to shape outcomes in the third world, or as it was called, the third world now, the global south, but did not have the tools of a formal empire, of direct colonial control that the Europeans had in
I'm just going to get a cookie.
America. So over the second half of the 20th century, what you see is a kind of a learning process through which the United States, the CIA is a protagonist early in the Cold War, but it's not the only actor, learns which things work. And the way I often visualize this is that the United States begins to accumulate a set of tricks and tools and approaches and scripts, a kind of a toolbox of things that have worked in some place and could work in somewhere else. And you see across the Cold War, oh, well, this worked here. It can be replicated there. This didn't work there. Let's tinker it. And over the second half of the 20th century, this toolbox gets bigger and bigger. There's more things that can be deployed around the world. Often you get US officials that move from one region to the other. You could see, oh, this person took that particular tool with them. And the Jakarta Method, as I call it, the intentional mass murder of unarmed leftists or people accused of being leftists, is perhaps the most horrible of the tools in this box, and it's the one that I concentrate on. But there's many others, and in the Cold War, the military coup is very common, and diplomatic economic pressure is very common, and so to get back to your actual question, I often try to say two things at the same time, and the first is that if something is in that box and it has been proved to work in the past, they don't throw it away. We should never believe that something that has happened in the past is too horrible to be used in the future. I think this is a fundamental historical mistake. That's not how history works. People in Chile, for example, in the early 70s, very tragically thought that could not happen to them. They thought, oh, a military coup with the generals overthrowing democracy, oh, that's from the 50s. That doesn't happen anymore. That's like Guatemala. This is Chile. This is the 70s. Yeah. So we should never believe that something cannot happen again, or that makes it more likely to happen again. And I think that something like the intentional mass murder of a political movement, absolutely, I think could be deployed if it were perceived by the right people to be the best tool for a particular outcome that is desired by those policymakers at a certain time. So at the same time that I say that, I also think that with the end of the Cold War, with the establishment of full global
Oh. I was just talking about Scrub Chair, okay? I know Scrub Chair had character. And I miss Scrub Chair too. Listen, I spent many a year sitting in that chair. That's why it's all fucked up looking. It's what did Sean say? Like it was worn down but dutiful, like us. That's right, Sean. Scrub Chair is just in the back. It's in the room in the back. It's still here. It's still around. Didn't get rid of it. It's just in the back room now. It's on a farm upstate. That's right. I think ultimately Scrub Chair was more comfortable on the old bum as well. This definitely that's why one of the reasons I had to get up there after sitting in here for like 3 hours straight. It starts to get a little uncomfortable. I think I prefer the more professional look though, frankly. I know it's He Old Yeller in Scrub Chair, that's right. Like Lenny and Mice and Men. I gave Scrub Chair, tell me about when we're going to play a game in the future. In the act of killing, they interview the murderers and they're so gleeful about it. Yeah, we should probably watch that sometime because it seems really horrific. Anyway, this is almost done. Then I got to say goodbye. I got to say goodbye in a couple minutes once this is done.
Capitalism, essentially, some exceptions, but with the establishment of the United States as truly the superpower at the center of a global capitalist system, you get a wider set of tools in this box. And often the wider set of tools, the more effective tools, are the more subtle ones. So even in the Cold War, they often did not want to employ the intentional mass murder of civilians. In Indonesia, this was the third thing they tried.
I think
it was only after
some of them
less direct, more subtle, less horrible. I mean, even if historically they may be monsters, on an individual level, these people weren't monsters. They would have preferred to crush the Indonesian left without bloodshed if they could have. Some of them were actual really bloodthirsty. But even in the 20th century, more subtle methods were usually preferred. I mean, a smart hegemon does not want to be seen to be intervening. A smart hegemon wants to shape outcomes without generating hatred on the ground. So with the 21st century,
that's kind of what JFK wanted.
More tools at the disposal of the hegemon.
It's not that he didn't want to have influence over these places. He just didn't want to. He's like, they're not going to like us if we go in and commit mass murder in their countries. Like, that's the whole thing about JFK. Not that he was some anti-imperialist or socialist or anything like that. He literally just wanted America to be a smart hegemon and influence these places by being nice to them and not be like going and fucking overthrowing their countries and destabilizing them and committing mass murder or torture programs. Like, that's the big difference, right? That is the difference. Issuing a corruption regarding the Indonesian mass murder group, you do not under any circumstances gotta hand it to them. No, you don't. Okay, you don't need to. I think I said merger twice there. You don't need to criticize my verbal flubs when I'm here talking about these important issues. Come on, let's keep the focus where it should be, folks. Come on now. Come on. my verbal flubs. Okay, how much time have we got? Another 10 minutes. We got to get through this. I'm going to go soon.
The United States and the victim. And of course, the real go-to method for shaping outcomes around the world in the last few years has been sanctions, right? And sanctions, it seems to be something that is politically very easy for the political class of the United States to throw sanctions somewhere. No one tends to stick around and ask, at least not ask very forcefully, if it actually did anything other than punish the country in question. There's very, very few cases of the stated goals of the sanctions being achieved. There's lots of cases of just collective punishment. So that leads one to believe perhaps that is the stated goal, or either they don't know what they're doing or they're lying about what they're doing it. But again, when you can establish these degrees of separation between the actor and the victim, it makes it harder for there to be media and democratic outcry, because you can say, well, it's actually not the sanctions that are, it's actually not Saudi Arabia and with U.S. support that's causing this massacre, or this mass death in Yemen. It is this war, or I don't know.
This MF said math deaths. Can you believe this guy? That's supposed to be a professional journalist. Give me a fucking break.
It becomes just those levels of separation make it easier to make it harder to someone to point the finger directly at the United States than if you have sort of the very overt and obvious sort of swashbuckling of the early CIA years. And I think this is part of this learning process. You have that in your toolbox, but if this will work, if a sanction will work, if economic pressure will work, if diplomatic pressure will work, tends to be what is tried first. So I think, it's a complicated and contradictory answer, but I think absolutely it could happen again. But when it doesn't, it's because there's other ways for the hegemon to shape outcomes, which work in a way which is create some distance between the actor and the victim.
Absolutely. I mean, sanctions are a huge part of it. You also have the funding of civil society groups to try and push certain ideas. And then, in various parts of the Middle East, you have funding of certain militias here and there. I mean,
Aaron, I'm going to pull the Batista in the wheelchair one day. I quit. The neck brace.
And not always by the United States, sometimes by U.S. allies. Oh, that's funny. My electricity just... Anyways, it's back on. And speaking of sanctions, of sanctions, I wanted to. I also wanted to ask you, because I think this is a really important episode as well. You actually wrote in this piece for the Atlantic. You talk about the book that you published on the Jakarta method, and that you also covered similar episodes throughout the Cold War. And you say there were so many that I missed the Sri Lanka case. In all, I found 22 episodes during the Cold War.
And also, I talked about how Bevins is like a journalist and doesn't engage in this conspiracy stuff. He talks about Kennedy a lot in the book, but doesn't get into any of the conspiracy stuff. And as Rania mentioned in this interview, a guy that has worked for the Washington Post has spent his whole career working for mainstream media. That's kind of interesting. It's something I find interesting about Bevins is that I don't know what his political orientation is. I don't know if he's a socialist or anti-imperialist or anything like that, but he's someone who, through just journalism, has been able to advance a lot of these ideas without really seeming very ideological at all, by literally just writing about the history of things that happened and writing about them in such a way that you're inevitably have to take certain conclusions from it, right? For example, with the Jakarta method too, that's one of the inevitable conclusions of this book, is that these revolutionary movements need to be armed, that they need to defend themselves with revolutionary violence. That's the inevitable conclusion of this book. Not that Vincent Bevins is saying yes, viva la revolution, and encouraging this kind of violent revolution. He doesn't at all. But that's just the inevitable conclusion you get from reading the history and from talking to people that were part of these movements. Talking to people that were part of the revolutionary movements, many of whom not very many of whom are still around, or people that were part of the movements that were saying, no, we shouldn't be violent. No, we need to work within the system. We can't alienate people by being violent. All those people today in Latin America and in Indonesia are saying whoa, I was kind of wrong about that, it turns out. And Mao was telling Suharno in Indonesia to arm his population. Castro was telling Allende, you got to arm the proletariat. You got to get ready. They're going to come for you. And they said, no, we're going to do it the right way. We're not. And that's the inevitable result. That is the inevitable result, is that they came in there with brutal violence and displaced these people and crushed these movements and destroyed them. That's one thing I appreciate about Bevins, though, is he's really not ideological at all. But there are certain inescapable conclusions that you come up with reading his journalism that he does. And I, respect to him for that. A revolution is not a dinner party or writing an essay or painting a picture, doing embroidery. Cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperate, kind, courteous, restrained, and magnanimous. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. And also, Engels. It's the most authoritarian thing you can do. Have a revolution. Like let's not have any qualms about that. Massacre in Indonesia was also very racist. It was a genocide as well. They took out lots of innocent Chinese Indonesians. That's a good, interesting point. Interesting point as well, Lexi. He's doing journalism without showing his political biases or ideologies. I'm sure Elon and other right-wingers would respect his journalistic work. Surely, that's right. Of course. Okay, this is almost done. I got to go soon.
Including the Indonesia massacre in which this Jakarta method was used. Sri Lanka makes it 23. So I'm curious if you could elaborate a little bit, like what episodes during the Cold War were similar to the murder of 1 million, perhaps, leftists in Indonesia, or people being accused of being in the Indonesian Communist Party, and how does Sri Lanka fit into this?
Yeah, so across the world, there were so many cases that as I said, I found 22, and then after the book came out, the hardcover, some people from Sri Lanka got in touch.
Yeah,
and
he does
said,
talk about Guatemala.
This case.
Yeah.
There was the intentional mass murder of this leftist,
Johnny,
the JP,
just time and time again.
And they called it. I don't know if it was It was maybe again mixed up because there's so many. In some parts of the world, there's Plan Jakarta. In some parts of the world, it's Operation Jakarta. Sometimes in the world, it's just Jakarta. I think it was the Jakarta solution, which is somehow the most ominous of all of them that they used to name the strategy which was going to be employed and ultimately would be employed, which was the mass murder of this leftist group or anybody that could be associated with them. And then you had horrible stories
even remotely associated
in Indonesia, sort of bodies strewn throughout the country because the idea was to terrorize, right? So, and again, I often find that it's really
Chinese
helpful to go
debt,
in a chronological
Chinese
order,
debt trap.
it's really kind of a learning process, right? So after 1965 in Indonesia, which historians of Asia believe was the first time that there were disappearances used as a method of state terror, not just killing people, but arresting them and then not disclosing to their family and loved ones if they had been killed, which is a really paralyzing and horrible form of psychological warfare against everybody that might want to believe that this person is still alive, and that stops you from taking action.
Like with that, in that case too, it's like you're not even inflicting violence on the individual. You're inflicting violence on all the people connected to that individual as well. It's terrorism. It's awful. Really awful.
Against the state.
We did this.
So in 65,
we did this around the world.
In Indonesia, you have the first instances of disappearances. Happily. You see disappearances appear in Guatemala and Venezuela 1 year later, and you have the transfer of U.S.
And we accuse all our enemies of doing the same thing
to Latin America. So it's very possible that they brought with them this new trick, this new approach that worked. And in the early 70s, you saw Jakarta employed as a terror campaign on the streets of Santiago. This was the years in which Salvador Allende, the democratically elected socialist, was facing domestic opposition, and Richard Nixon had been trying since before he took office. This is important to recognize. They did not wait for him to make any mistakes. They wanted to destroy his presidency before it even started. Brazil was actively collaborating to prepare the ground for a coup. So on the streets of Santiago, you had the word Jakarta written on walls, or you had postcards sent to the homes of leftists or accused leftists or employees of the government that said just either Jakarta or Jakarta is coming. And of course, very tragically, in 1973, Jakarta did come in Chile with the US-backed coup that ended up creating the Pinochet dictatorship. So in Chile, you had about 3,000 people killed in that first moment. After that, you get the establishment of Operation Condor throughout all of South America, which is a international terror campaign which allowed the countries of South America, now almost all governed by U.S. allied authoritarian capitalist dictatorships, to trade information so they could kill their perceived enemies outside of their own countries. So the worst offender in terms of numbers in the Operation
That's what I mean,
Condor period was
Johnny,
Argentina,
we're on the same wavelength.
Tens of thousands of leftists or accused leftists or people perceived to be enemies of the regime. Notably, Operation Condor also targeted people in Europe. Notably, they also targeted people that were not leftists at all, that were former members of the military establishment that might talk about what happened. This happened with the former head of the Chilean armed forces when he was killed in Buenos Aires. And then in the 1980s, as Central America becomes the perceived problem spot for U.S. policymakers in the Cold War, you get Operation Condor officials coming up to Central America to teach Central American military officials how.
I mean, it's really like, Johnny, it's really, you got Operation Phoenix in Vietnam, you got Gladio in Europe, and you got Operation Condor in South America. And the purpose of all these different clandestine operations were pretty much the same, wasn't it? You know? Destabilizing, arming militants, arming Contras, destroy communism, destroy any working class movement, any means necessary, disappearances, torture, assassination.
To employ the same types of counterinsurgency terror methods.
False flags to blame on the left.
Again, in this point,
wonder if that's still
we have
going
some
on.
evidence that they spoke about Plan Jakarta. That
I wonder if that kind of stuff is still going on. Unfortunately, there's just no way of knowing. We better give these same people the benefit of the doubt, though. Right? Let's still give them the benefit of the doubt for some reason.
Guatemalan death squad member was brought together with an Argentine death squad member by the U.S. ambassador to Spain in Madrid, while still under Franco's rule, to explain how Jakarta could work. And then it is in Central America in the 1980s that you have the numbers that come closest to the Indonesian case. You have hundreds of thousands killed in Guatemala, where this politicide, as you described earlier, really spills over into actual genocide. They target ethnicities for being perceived to be sort of racially predisposed to communism, right? Like, oh, this tribe, they're collective, so they're all going to go communist. Entire villages wiped out, hundreds of thousands killed in Central America in the 80s. And this is now, by this time in the Cold War, you get it comes full circle in terms of the beginning of this method in the first place, because the first time that we know of in the Cold War, where the U.S. encouraged a local military junta or military government to carry out the intentional mass murder of leftists, was in Guatemala in 1954.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. Freelance communist
against Jacobo Arbenz in the very early days of the CIA. This is when the CIA was, to go back to that metaphor, figuring out that the military coup was a great tool in its box. After Iran in 53 and Guatemala in 1954, the CIA really gets a new lease on life in Washington. They're perceived to be people that can get things done with a relatively low cost for the United States. But Guatemala, of course, immediately becomes a civil war. And 40 years later now, this wound is still open and causing mass death very close to the United States.
It's freaking unbelievable when you like lay it all out like that, just one horror story after another. Vincent, I want to end here asking you, I know you're working on other stuff. I think you're working on an upcoming book. Do you want to say anything about that? Mm-hmm. Or plug anything before we wrap?
Yeah. I don't need to plug anything, but yeah, I started working on a second.
This is Rania Khalek. She's a host of Breakthrough News, friend of the stream, former guest of the stream. Definitely someone, if you want to talk about these or learn about these subjects, these issues, someone who does really great commentary and coverage and journalism about these kinds of the subjects that we've been talking about today.
Second book years ago, right when I finished the first book. It is a history. It's a more recent history that focuses on mass protest movements around the world. I visited quite a lot of countries to write it, but the main narrative will be Brazil, which is why I moved back to Sao Paulo in about a year ago. But yeah, that'll come out next year. People can find me wherever, but yeah, there'll be a book coming out next year.
Well, I want to thank you.
There'll be more on it when we're close to publication. But yeah, that's what I've been working on for 8 years now.
Oh.
Okay, great stuff. I just dropped the link of the video that we just watched in the chat. If you're not familiar with Breakthrough News or Rania's work, I really recommend you give them a follow. Really has been a vital resource, definitely for me and us in this community over the last year, especially for interviews and commentary that really helps us to engage in this process of deprogramming ourselves from the relentless pro-Western narrative that we're just constantly inundated with about any of these foreign policy related subjects. Has been very, very good, very, very helpful. That's going to do it for me today, folks. I even went longer than usual. This has been the longest stream in a little while. So thank you for watching. I'm halfway to the sub goal. I was recommended this channel in another chat. First time tuning in, here's my take. It's good, folks. Barbara, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Barbara. I'm glad you tuned in and enjoyed the stream today. Thank you for watching. Halfway to the sub goal, folks. I don't know if we're going to get all the way there today. And, as usual, that is fine. If possible, though, please, if you do enjoy this commentary...
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
If you do enjoy this program and this commentary and you want to help keep it on the air, please subscribe to the channel. A few generous chatters could get us to the sub goal. Generous chatters like Ghost. Thank you, Ghost, for the 5 gifted subs. Very, very kind of you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, if you do enjoy the stream, you do enjoy this kind of commentary and discussion on Twitch, if you want to see more of it, I know sometimes I think politically Twitch is kind of a little lacking, as I was mentioning earlier, when it comes to
You're gonna have good
some
old
of these
Rob
subjects.
To talk you through
so
all
if
this.
you want to support that, that's how you do it, is by subscribing to the channel.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship
goodness.
Triangle.
Oh my goodness gracious, folks. Look at this. This wonderful, generous community coming through again.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Goodness gracious. A few more subs and I can get a bucket of popcorn for Avatar 2.
To talk you through all this. You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
My goodness. Folks, I really appreciate...
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
I know sometimes I'm negging you and whatever, but I really can't stress enough how much I appreciate all the really
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Enjoy Avatar, Rob. Cannot wait to hear your analysis of it. Be safe and take care, comrades. TRRS Sankara.
Thank you, Dimitri, for the 200 friend coin and the 2 gifted subs. Thanks, Dimitri. Thank you, Part Ian, for the 2 gifted subs as well. Thank you, Miguelit69, for the 5 gifted subs. Very kind of you. A relatively new chatter. Miguelit69, first 5 gifted subs in the channel. Very, very kind of you. I really appreciate it. Already, look at that. 5 gifted subs already. An elite member of the Friendship Triangle. Thank you, Miguelit69. Thanks, Relic, for the gifted sub to our new friend, Barbara. Thanks for joining us, Barbara, and thank you, Relic. Anonymous Gifter, thanks for gifting a sub. Very much appreciated. Our most selfless, Christ-like sub gifters there are. Anonymous Gifter. Thank you, Anonymous Gifter. Thank you to Matt from Unelectable Airwaves as well for the 200 friend coin. Thank you, Matt. Very much appreciated. And folks, we're 1 away. We are 1 sub away. Can you feel the energy? Can you feel the excitement? Imagine that good feeling we could have if we ended off the week of streaming on this positive note of hitting the sub goal. Imagine how we could all feel good about that. All of us, each and every one of us. It's not just about me, right? It's not just about me at all. In fact, I don't even mind. I can leave. We can go. What do we want to do? 33, 34, whatever. It's not a big deal to me. It's more for you. It's more for you and the good feeling of seeing the little number, go and become the good number. We can't do 33 now. No, I mean that ship has sailed, obviously, but it's not. Remember, it's not about me. It's not about my personal benefit. I don't mind. Just shameless. Just absolutely shameless as people are being kind and generous, just displaying this unprecedented generosity. And I'm still not enough. It's still not enough for me, is it? No. This is what this platform does to me. It's shameful, frankly. It's shameful what this does to you. I thought we were contributing to the Na'vi Liberation Fund. We gotta arm the Na'vi. Arm the Na'vi, folks. Not enough people are saying it. Not enough people are saying this. Let's go ahead and raid our friends. You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk thank you very much. You got this, Rob. Don't be self-deprecating. I can't help it. I can't help it. Part Ian, thank you very much. Part Ian steps up after gifting 2 subs already. Part Ian steps up to get the channel all the way there. Thank you, Part Ian. I really appreciate it, and thank you to all of you for tuning in today. I had fun, and this week I promised a full week, and it wasn't. It was 4 days out of 5. That was the 100% Rob guarantee, but I think that still counts. That's still pretty good. So I'll be back on Monday. I'll be around next week. Then I will be taking a break for a little while for the holidays, Christmas, and all that stuff. So we'll see how that goes. But you just got one more week of me bugging you about slubs and all this business. And then you won't have to hear from me for a little while. So thanks again. Thanks again, folks. Christmas in this economy? That's right. Thanks again, folks. It was a blast. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Avatar 2. I'm going to be watching Avatar 2 in a mere 2 hours from now. From this very moment, I'm going to be arriving at the theater. Unbelievable. I'm very, very excited. We're going to fire up a spoiler thread in the Discord for anyone that watches the movie this weekend and wants to discuss it. We can do that in the Discord server, whichever one should join. Give my regards to Left Flank Vets, and I'll talk to you on Monday. Goodbye.